It's about Monday's meeting.
I didn't ask.
This was created before the argument happened. There's more.
Timothy Mason was 46, a facilities maintenance supervisor in Raleigh, North Carolina. Most people around Parker believed he was simply the husband who had stopped climbing. He drove a 12-year-old Ford packed coffee from home and spent Saturdays fixing whatever broke. What they didn't know was that Timothy had spent 14 years investigating corporate fraud. That Saturday, while vacuuming Parker's white Lexus, his fingers caught something beneath the back seat. He pulled it free. Charcoal gray men's underwear. Size medium. Timothy wore large. Then Parker's footsteps sounded behind him. Before we continue, tell me in the comments what country you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And if you enjoy stories where patience matters more than noise, subscribe to the channel. Because what Timothy did next began with something almost nobody expected. Nothing changed at breakfast. Timothy heard Parker before he saw her. The heels of her sandals struck the concrete garage floor in quick, hollow taps. He looked once at the charcoal gray boxer briefs in his hand. Medium! He had worn large since his 30s. There was no reasonable way they belonged to him. For half a second, his body wanted what any husband's body might want. His pulse climbed. His jaw tightened. Questions arrived faster than answers. Who's, how long, where? But 14 years of investigative work had taught Timothy something anger never learned. The first explanation was not always the right one. He folded the underwear along the crease where he had found it, lowered it beneath the rear edge of the seat, and pushed it back until only a strip of gray fabric remained visible. The garage door opened wider. Parker stepped inside carrying a glass of iced tea. Making progress. Timothy switched the vacuum off. The sudden silence made the garage feel smaller. Almost done. Parker leaned against the Lexus. She wore white shorts and a loose blue blouse. Her phone rested in her other hand. She looked through the open rear door. Find anything embarrassing? The question landed cleanly. Timothy studied her face. Not dramatically. Not long enough to make her suspicious. He had spent years watching executives answer questions about missing invoices and altered purchase orders. People often believed guilt announced itself through trembling hands or wandering eyes. Usually it didn't. Sometimes guilty people smiled. Sometimes innocent people looked terrified. A face was not evidence. Just receipts and coffee cups, Timothy said. Parker laughed. Sounds like me. She took another drink and walked back toward the house. Timothy watched her disappear through the kitchen door. Then he turned toward the Lexus. The gray fabric remained exactly where he had left it. He finished vacuuming the car. He cleaned the dashboard. He wiped fingerprints from the navigation screen. He even filled the windshield washer reservoir. Nothing about his movements changed. That was the hardest part. Sunday morning looked ordinary, too. At 8:12, Timothy stood at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into the same dark green mug he had used for years. Parker sat at the breakfast table scrolling through emails. Sunlight came through the blinds in narrow stripes. You working Wednesday night again? Timothy asked. Parker didn't look up. Client dinner? Where? Probably downtown. Timothy nodded. For months, Wednesday dinners had become common. He had never thought much about them. Parker was senior sales director at Bellweather Medical Solutions. Evening dinners were part of the job. But memory had changed overnight. Timothy remembered the Wednesday she came home at 11:43. The Wednesday she said a meeting ran long. The Wednesday the Lexus had almost 200 extra miles on it after what was supposed to be a Raleigh dinner. He hated what suspicion did. It took harmless memories and forced them back into the courtroom. The front door opened at 10:26. Dad. Emily Mason came in carrying a canvas NC State bag and a paper sack from a bakery. Timothy smiled for the first time that morning without having to think about it. You're early. Traffic wasn't bad. Emily was 19 and finishing her freshman year at North Carolina State University. She had Timothy's dark eyes and Parker's quick smile. She dropped her bag near the stairs and handed him the bakery sack. Cinnamon rolls. Bribery. Obviously. They ate lunch together later at the kitchen island. Emily talked about a statistics exam and a roommate who had somehow ruined macaroni and cheese. For 20 minutes, Timothy almost forgot the Lexus. Then Parker walked in, wearing a charcoal business suit. She looked at Timothy's faded work shirt hanging over the back of a chair. "You're wearing that Monday?" Timothy glanced at it. "Probably." Parker smiled toward Emily. "Your father could own 3 decent shirts and still pick the one that looks like he repairs air conditioners for a living." Timothy took another bite of his sandwich. "I do repair air conditioners." Emily didn't laugh. "Dad runs an entire maintenance department." "It's a joke," Parker said. Timothy noticed Emily looking at him. He gave her a small smile. "It's fine." And it was. Or at least that particular comment was. He would not make his daughter responsible for defending him against her mother. That evening, Emily returned to campus. At 9:40, Parker went upstairs to shower. Timothy remained downstairs. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. Face down. That was new. Or perhaps it wasn't. That was the danger. Once suspicion entered a marriage, everything could become evidence if a person wanted it badly enough. Timothy refused to work that way. He walked past the phone without touching it. In the laundry room, he opened the cabinet above the dryer and pulled down a black, fireproof document case. Dust covered one corner. He carried it into the small downstairs office. The lock opened with a key he kept on his ring. Inside were tax documents, his father's death certificate, old employment records, and 4 black notebooks. Timothy lifted the top notebook. The final entry was dated 11 years earlier. Back then, he had worked in corporate investigations and internal controls. His days had been filled with reimbursement schemes, procurement fraud, false vendors' altered invoices, and people who lied confidently because they believed confidence could replace facts. After his father's death, Timothy had walked away. He wanted predictable hours. He wanted dinner with Emily. He wanted weekends. Triangle Medical Properties had offered him that. Eventually, the investigator had disappeared beneath work boots and maintenance schedules, but the habits had remained. Timothy opened a fresh notebook. He wrote carefully. Saturday, April 11th, 9:18 a.m., white Lexus RX, residence garage, item found beneath rear passenger seat, charcoal gray men's boxer briefs, size M. He stopped. The pen hovered over the paper. He could have written, "Parker is cheating." He didn't. That was a conclusion. He had one object, nothing more. Timothy added, "Ownership, unknown." He closed the notebook. Upstairs, the shower stopped. The house settled around him with familiar sounds. Water moving through pipes, the refrigerator compressor clicking on, Parker walking across the bedroom floor. Timothy sat alone for another minute. He was angry now. There was no reason to pretend otherwise. The anger sat beneath his ribs like something hot and metallic. But anger did not get to hold the pen. Facts did. The next morning, Parker left for work at 7:31. She kissed Timothy lightly on the cheek before walking toward the garage. "Don't forget we're almost out of milk." "I'll get some." The Lexus backed down the driveway. Timothy stood at the kitchen window until it disappeared. He looked at the clock. Then he opened the notebook again. There were things he had noticed over the past 6 months. Things he had dismissed because marriage was supposed to contain trust. Wednesday dinners, unexplained mileage, Durham parking receipts. A phone that increasingly stayed face down. Timothy wrote none of them yet. Memory could bend. Records were better. He closed the notebook and left for work. At 6:17 that evening, he stopped at Harris Teeter for milk. When he returned home, Parker's Lexus was gone. A text waited on his phone. "Client dinner. Don't wait up." Timothy read it twice. Then he looked toward the empty side of the driveway. Wednesday? He checked the date. For the first time, Timothy Mason wasn't wondering whether something felt wrong. He was building a timeline. The discipline of waiting. By Thursday morning. Timothy had made 5 rules. He wrote them on the inside cover of the black notebook before leaving for work. No passwords, no tracking devices, no hidden recordings, no following Parker, no conclusions without evidence. He read the list twice. The rules were not for Parker. They were for him. Suspicion could make a reasonable man feel entitled to unreasonable things. Timothy knew that from experience. Years earlier, he had investigated a purchasing manager who was certain his business partner was stealing from him. The man had broken into a private email account, secretly recorded conversations, and destroyed half his credibility before the real investigation even began. Timothy would not make that mistake. If his marriage was ending, he wanted to know why. If Parker was innocent of what he suspected, he wanted to leave himself a way back. And if she wasn't, he wanted facts that could survive daylight. At Triangle Medical Properties, Timothy spent Thursday replacing a failed circulation pump in a 6-story medical office building on Wake Forest Road. By noon, his work shirt was damp between the shoulders. At 12:18, he sat in the maintenance office with a turkey sandwich and opened the banking app on his phone. The account was joint. His name was on it. So was Parker's. Timothy downloaded 6 months of statements. He did the same with their shared credit card. He did not search for affair. He searched for patterns. December 9th, Briarstone Hotel Durham, 18642, January 13th. Briarstone Grill, 9480, January 27th. Parking garage, West Main Street, Durham, $24, February 10th. Briarstone Hotel, 211-67, March 17th. Another parking charge. Then April 7th, 20319 at the Briarstone. Timothy leaned back. Most were Wednesdays. He checked his phone calendar. December 9th, Parker had texted him at 6:41 that evening. Client dinner. Don't wait up, January 13th. Same explanation, February 10th. Same. Timothy felt the familiar pressure beneath his ribs. He closed his eyes for 3 seconds. Then he opened them and returned to the statements. A hotel charge was not proof of adultery. Parker worked in medical sales. Clients traveled, conferences happened, corporate cards failed, expenses were reimbursed. There could be explanations. Timothy wrote the dates down anyway. Beside each entry, he placed a small question mark. At 2:30, he returned to work. That evening, Parker came home at 7:08 carrying 2 grocery bags. Can you grab the water from the trunk? Sure. Timothy followed her into the garage. The white Lexus stood beneath the fluorescent lights. For a moment, he looked at the rear passenger door. He could have opened it. He could have checked whether the underwear was still there. He didn't. Instead, he removed a case of sparkling water from the trunk and carried it inside. On Friday morning, Timothy sent a text to someone he had not seen in almost 8 months. Coffee tomorrow. Benjamin Carter answered 11 minutes later. Thought you'd never ask. Saturday at 900. Timothy parked outside Oak City Coffee, near downtown Raleigh. Benjamin was already there. At 52, he had more gray in his beard than the last time Timothy had seen him, but everything else looked familiar. Navy jacket, rimless glasses, legal pad beside his coffee. Benjamin had worked beside Timothy for 9 years. Back then, they had investigated companies from the inside: false vendors, inflated invoices, expense manipulation, kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. Benjamin eventually left corporate work and built a small forensic accounting practice of his own. Timothy had chosen a different exit. You look tired, Benjamin said. Good morning to you too. That's what old friends are for. Timothy sat across from him. For 10 minutes they talked about ordinary things: Emily, work, Benjamin's second marriage, a commercial fraud case in Greensboro that Benjamin described without naming the client. Then Benjamin leaned back. So why are we actually here? Timothy looked through the window. A city bus moved past. I need a hypothetical answer. Benjamin smiled faintly. Those are usually expensive. Suppose someone thought divorce litigation might become possible. The smile disappeared. Timothy continued. Nothing filed, nothing confirmed, but possible. Benjamin set down his coffee. What kind of records? Joint banking, credit cards, property, household expenses. Preserve originals where you can. Download statements from accounts you're legally authorized to access. Don't alter anything. Don't access accounts that aren't yours. Keep dates, keep sources. Timothy nodded. And if you suspect financial misconduct? Same answer. Don't become creative. Benjamin studied him. Timothy knew that look. They had once spent 12 hours together interviewing a controller who had hidden $430,000 through fictitious maintenance vendors. Benjamin had worn that same expression before asking the question that broke the case open. Who are you investigating, Tim? Timothy looked down at his coffee. I'm trying to make sure I don't investigate the wrong person. Benjamin remained silent. He did not push. That was why Timothy had called him. Before leaving, Benjamin said one more thing. Whatever you think you know, separate it into 3 columns. What you know, what you can prove, what you're assuming. Timothy nodded. I remember. I know you do. Monday evening, Parker entered the kitchen while Timothy was chopping onions. I have Charlotte this week. Timothy kept cutting. When? Wednesday through Saturday. Conference. Regional Sales Summit. Timothy placed the knife down. Hotel already booked. Company handled it. Okay. Parker opened the refrigerator. I'll probably be unreachable during some of the sessions. That's fine. She glanced toward him. You don't mind? Why would I? No reason. Timothy returned to the onions. Drive safe. Later that night, Parker went upstairs. Timothy remained at the kitchen table with his laptop. He searched Bellweather Medical Solutions and the name of the sales summit. The event was not private. A public registration page appeared in the search results. Carolina's Medical Sales Leadership Summit, Charlotte Convention Center, Tuesday, April 21st through Thursday, April 23rd. Timothy read the dates again. Parker had said Wednesday through Saturday. He did not smile. He did not feel victorious. He felt tired. He opened the notebook. Charlotte Summit. Public event dates April 21-23. Parker stated travel April 22-25. Difference 2 days. He stopped there. No accusation. No theory. On Wednesday morning, Parker loaded a black suitcase into the Lexus. Timothy stood in the driveway with his coffee. She wore sunglasses despite the gray sky. Don't forget Emily's calling Thursday, Timothy said. I won't. Parker kissed his cheek. See you Saturday. Drive safe. The Lexus disappeared around the corner. Timothy went inside. At 8:06, he left for work. The envelope arrived Thursday. It was not dramatic. No attorney's name, no threatening language, just a standard notification from Piedmont Community Bank where Timothy and Parker held their mortgage. Timothy almost placed it with the other mail. Then he saw one phrase through the envelope window. Property valuation inquiry. He opened it at the kitchen counter. The letter thanked the household for a recent request for preliminary information concerning refinancing options on the Mason residence. Timothy read it once. Then again. He had made no such request. He walked into the office and retrieved the mortgage folder. Both names were on the loan. Timothy Mason. Parker Mason. He checked their current balance. Then he returned to the letter. The underwear had made him think about another man. The hotel charges had made him think about an affair. The false Charlotte dates had made him think Parker was lying about where she spent her time. But this was different. This involved the house. Their house. The place where Emily had taken her first steps. The kitchen Timothy had remodeled himself. The mortgage they had spent 17 years paying down. Timothy sat at the desk. He took out the black notebook. For the first time since beginning the timeline, he hesitated before writing. Then he copied the date from the bank notice. Below it he wrote, "Refinance information requested." Requested by whom? Timothy looked toward the empty driveway. Parker was supposedly in Charlotte. He placed the bank letter beside the notebook. Until that moment, he had been trying to determine whether his wife was seeing another man. Now, a colder question had entered the room. Why was someone measuring the value of their home? Someone was measuring the house. Timothy called Piedmont Community Bank at 8:14 Friday morning. He made the call from his truck before walking into Triangle Medical Properties. The woman who answered transferred him twice before a mortgage specialist named Allison came on the line. Timothy gave his name, verified the last 4 digits of his Social Security number, and provided the mortgage account number. "I received a letter yesterday about a refinancing inquiry," he said. "Yes, Mr. Mason, I see that. I didn't request one." There was a pause. Timothy watched employees entering the medical building through the glass doors. "No refinance application was completed," Allison said. "It appears to have been a preliminary information request." "What information?" "Estimated loan options, current balance, approximate property valuation." Timothy kept his voice level. "Can you tell me when—" Keyboard clicks came through the speaker. "April 9th. 2 days before he found the underwear." Timothy looked through the windshield. "And the valuation?" "Our automated estimate was approximately $742,000. That's not an appraisal, of course." "I understand." Their mortgage balance was a little under $286,000. Timothy did the subtraction without a calculator. Roughly $456,000 in equity before fees adjustments and whatever an actual sale might bring. "Was any application submitted?" "No." "Any credit pulled?" "Not according to what I'm seeing." "Thank you." He ended the call. For nearly a minute, he remained behind the wheel. The parking lot around him filled. A delivery van backed toward the loading entrance. Someone laughed near the front doors. Normal Friday morning sounds. Timothy opened his notebook. April 9th. Preliminary refinance inquiry. Estimated property value $742,000. No application completed. He underlined the final sentence once. That mattered. Facts first. Parker had access to their mortgage information. She had every legal right to ask questions about property they owned together. Maybe she was curious about interest rates. Maybe she had considered renovations. Maybe she wanted to consolidate debt, but she had not mentioned any of it. And now Timothy knew the inquiry happened before the underwear appeared beneath the Lexus seat. He closed the notebook. At work, a compressor failure kept him occupied until nearly 4. He welcomed it. Machines were easier than people. A compressor did not lie about why it stopped working. Pressure dropped. Temperature rose. A bearing failed. A relay burned. Find the cause. Replace the part. Test the system. People were different. People could break something and then explain the damage until you doubted your own eyes. Parker returned Saturday afternoon at 3:38. Timothy heard the Lexus pull into the garage. He was replacing a loose hinge on a kitchen cabinet. "Tim." "In here." Parker entered, pulling a black suitcase behind her. A large tan leather handbag hung from her shoulder. Timothy had never seen it before. "How was Charlotte?" "Exhausting." She dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl near the door. 3 days of people talking about quarterly targets like civilization depends on them." Timothy tightened the final screw. "Sounds productive." Parker smiled. Then she noticed him looking at the handbag. "You like it?" "It's nice. Bellweather gave it to me." "For what?" "Sales award." Timothy nodded. "Congratulations." She looked at him for a second. "That's it. What do you want me to do?" "I don't know. Act impressed. Timothy smiled slightly. I'm impressed. Parker carried the suitcase upstairs. Timothy remained in the kitchen. He knew enough about Bellweather to know Parker posted professional achievements online almost immediately. Awards, conferences, sales rankings, team dinners. He had seen photographs of plaques before Parker even brought them home. He did not search her private accounts. He did not need to. The company's public professional page showed photographs from the Charlotte summit. Awards had been given Thursday afternoon. 6 names appeared. Parker Mason was not among them. Timothy closed the browser. He did not write, Parker lied about handbag. He wrote, stated handbag was Bellweather Sales Award. Public award list does not include Parker. Possible explanations remain. That last sentence mattered. He could almost hear Benjamin saying it. What you know, what you can prove, what you're assuming. Sunday brought Emily home again. She arrived just before noon with laundry. Timothy was in the backyard cleaning leaves from the gutter above the patio when she stepped outside. Dad. He looked down. What's wrong? Nothing. Timothy climbed down the ladder. Emily folded her arms. Mom asked me something weird. His hand stopped on the ladder rail. What? About Grandpa. Timothy wiped his palms on his jeans. What about him? She asked if you ever told me what happened to his investments after he died. Timothy said nothing for a moment. Emily shrugged. I told her I didn't know. That's fine. Was I supposed to know? No. Is there some kind of family money? There it was. Timothy looked toward the kitchen windows. Parker was inside. He could see her moving past the sink. Emily, your grandfather arranged his estate the way he wanted it arranged. So there are family assets. How much? Timothy shook his head. That's not something you need to worry about. Mom made it sound like you were hiding millions somewhere. Timothy felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger at Emily. Never that. He placed one hand on her shoulder. Listen to me. Whatever is happening between your mother and me, you don't become the messenger. Emily's expression changed. Something is happening. Timothy realized his mistake. He had opened a door he was trying to keep closed. We're working through some things. Are you getting divorced? I didn't say that. But you're acting weird. Timothy looked at his daughter. He wanted to tell her. The underwear, the hotel, Charlotte, the house. He wanted someone else to carry 10 pounds of what had been sitting on his chest for 2 weeks. But Emily was 19. She was their daughter, not his witness. Your mother and I will handle our marriage, he said. You handle school? That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Emily stared at him, then nodded reluctantly. Timothy watched her return inside. That evening after Emily left for campus, he went to the downstairs office. The Mason Family Preservation Trust occupied a blue binder in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. Timothy removed it. His father, Richard Mason, had established the structure years before his death. Richard had owned commercial property interests, municipal bonds, shares in 2 privately held companies, and a conservative investment portfolio accumulated over 4 decades. He had not left Timothy a suitcase full of cash. He had done something more complicated. The assets had been placed under the Mason Family Preservation Trust. Margaret Mason, Richard's younger sister, served as trustee. Timothy was a discretionary beneficiary. That distinction mattered a great deal. The trust could make distributions under specified conditions. Timothy could not simply call Margaret and demand $5 million. He could not sell trust property. He could not pledge the portfolio as though it were his personal checking account. The last valuation Timothy remembered seeing placed the trust assets somewhere above $4 million. Maybe higher now. He had never cared enough to track the number monthly. His salary paid his bills. His retirement account grew. The mortgage got smaller. That was enough. Timothy opened the drawer again. He stopped. A stack of old trust correspondence sat crooked against the side. Timothy stared at it. He was particular about documents, always had been. Bank statements by year, tax returns labeled, insurance policies clipped together. Trust correspondence arranged newest to oldest. Now 3 letters were reversed. One envelope sat beneath a document that should have been behind it. Someone had been through the drawer. Timothy pulled out the letters. The first concerned a routine tax filing. The second summarized a distribution made years earlier for Emily's educational benefit. The third explained limitations on beneficiary authority. Timothy read the heading twice: beneficiary rights and trustee discretion. He sat down. Parker knew the trust existed. Of course she did. But Timothy had never discussed its exact structure with her because there had been little reason to. It was not money he used to support their lifestyle. It had never paid their mortgage. It had never bought Parker's Lexus. It had never funded vacations. Now Emily's comment returned. Mom made it sound like you were hiding millions somewhere. Timothy opened his notebook. He wrote Parker asked Emily about Richard Mason's investments. Trust correspondence appears disturbed. Then he stopped. He did not write Parker searched drawer. He could not prove that. Instead, unknown person accessed or moved documents. He stared at the words. For 2 weeks, Timothy had believed he was looking at a marriage problem. Another man. Secret meetings. A hotel. Those things hurt, but they were understandable in the ugliest ordinary way. This was different. The house valuation, questions about his father's investments. Trust documents moved. Timothy closed the binder and returned it to the drawer. Upstairs, Parker laughed at something on television. He heard the sound through the ceiling. Timothy remained still. He was beginning to see 2 timelines. One involved another man. The other involved money. He did not yet know where they crossed. But for the first time, Timothy suspected the underwear on the back seat might not be the most dangerous thing he had found. The man in the photograph. Timothy found Connor Blake on a Tuesday night. Not through Parker's phone, not through a private email, not by following her. Parker put him there herself. Bellweather Medical Solutions had sponsored a fundraising dinner for the North Carolina Children's Health Foundation at the Raleigh Convention Center. Parker attended without Timothy because she had told him it was primarily a company event. 2 days later, Bellweather posted photographs publicly. Timothy saw them while sitting at the kitchen table after dinner. Parker was upstairs. He moved through the photographs slowly. Executives beside banners. Sales representatives holding wine glasses. A hospital administrator shaking hands with Bellweather's chief operating officer. Then Parker appeared. She stood near the center of a group of 6 people. Black dress, silver earrings, one hand around a champagne glass. A man stood beside her. Timothy stopped scrolling. The caption identified him. Connor Blake, Regional Vice President. Timothy enlarged the photograph. Connor looked about 40. Athletic build, dark brown hair cut close at the sides, expensive navy suit. None of that mattered. Timothy's attention settled on Connor's left wrist. A silver watch. Beside it, a narrow brown leather bracelet wrapped twice around his wrist. Timothy sat back. Something about it bothered him. He closed the photograph, then opened it again. The bracelet. He had seen it before, but where Timothy remained at the table for nearly 5 minutes. He refused to force the memory. That was another habit from his old work. The mind hated empty spaces. Give it enough pressure and it would happily manufacture something that felt like certainty. He shut the laptop. At 10:17, while brushing his teeth, the answer arrived. A photograph. 3 weeks earlier. Emily had texted a picture to the family group chat after Parker picked her up from campus. Emily had taken the photograph from the front passenger seat of the Lexus. Parker was driving. Emily had captioned it. Mom finally picked me up on time. Timothy retrieved his phone. He found the message. The photograph showed Parker laughing behind the wheel. Nothing unusual, but in the rear passenger window, there was a reflection. Part of a man's forearm, a hand, a watch, and something dark wrapped around the wrist. Timothy enlarged the image. The reflection was distorted. The details were poor. It could have been a leather bracelet. It could have been a shadow. Timothy lowered the phone. Not proof. He wrote nothing in the notebook that night. 3 days later, Parker brought Connor directly to him. Bellweather hosted a Friday evening reception at the Umstead Hotel in Cary for employees, clients, and spouses. Parker had insisted Timothy attend. "You should meet people from my world once in a while," she had said. Timothy almost smiled at the phrase, her world. He wore a charcoal suit he had owned for 7 years. Parker looked at his tie before they left. "That's the one you're wearing. Unless there's a safety issue. It's just old. It still ties." Parker exhaled. Never mind. The reception occupied a ballroom overlooking the gardens. Timothy spent the first 40 minutes listening more than speaking. He met 2 orthopedic sales managers, a hospital procurement director, and a cardiology representative from Greensboro. Then Parker touched his arm. "Timothy, this is Connor." Timothy turned. The man from the photograph stood in front of him. Up close, Connor Blake was polished in a way Timothy recognized immediately. White shirt fitted precisely, shoes without a visible crease, watch expensive enough to make a statement without being loud. And on his left wrist was the brown leather bracelet. Connor extended his hand. "Timothy Mason." "That's right." They shook. "Finally," Connor said. "Parker talks about you." Timothy glanced toward Parker. "Only good things, I hope." Connor laughed. "Mostly." Parker smiled. Timothy let the word pass. Connor lifted his drink. "Parker says you manage buildings, facilities operations, commercial, medical offices. Good business. It keeps the lights on." Connor smiled. Timothy could feel Parker watching. Then Connor said, "I guess Parker's the ambitious one in the family." There was a small pause. Parker laughed first. Connor joined her. Timothy looked at him. He had spent enough years interviewing people to understand the usefulness of letting silence remain where someone expected a reaction. "She's certainly ambitious," Timothy said. Connor's smile changed slightly. "That's what makes her good." "So I've heard." A server passed with appetizers. Timothy took one. Connor changed the subject. They talked about Raleigh traffic medical sales and a new restaurant downtown. 10 minutes later, Connor mentioned Durham. "The Briarstone has a surprisingly good restaurant," he said. "Terrible lobby, good steak." Timothy looked at him. "You spend much time there?" "In Durham, hardly ever." Connor took a drink. "I'm mostly Charlotte and Richmond." Timothy nodded. "Long drives?" "You get used to them." The conversation moved on, but Timothy stored the sentence. Hardly ever. Briarstone hotel charges had appeared repeatedly on the Mason joint card. That still did not prove Connor had been there with Parker. It proved Connor knew the restaurant, nothing more. Timothy kept reminding himself of that. 20 minutes later, Parker stepped away to speak with a hospital executive. Connor remained beside Timothy. "You ever think about moving into something bigger?" Connor asked. "Bigger than what? Career-wise?" Timothy looked toward him. Connor smiled as if the question were friendly. "Management, corporate operations, something with more upside. I manage 12 properties. Sure, I mean financially." Timothy took a slow drink of water. "I'm doing fine." Connor nodded. "That's what matters." The tone said something else. Timothy felt the old instinct rise. Not anger, recognition. Connor had categorized him. People did it quickly. shoes, job title, watch, vocabulary. Within minutes, they decided who mattered. Timothy had watched executives make that mistake across conference tables for 14 years. He never corrected them. Being underestimated was often useful. Parker returned. "We're talking careers," she asked. "Connor thinks I need one." Connor laughed. "I didn't say that." Timothy smiled. "Close enough?" Parker touched Connor's forearm. Briefly. Probably harmless. Except Timothy noticed how naturally she did it, and how quickly her hand dropped. Later, the three stood near the bar. Parker complained about the Lexus needing another detailing. Timothy saw an opening. "I thought I did a decent job last time." "You did. I found enough coffee receipts to reconstruct 6 months of your life." Parker smiled. Connor did not. For less than a second, Parker looked at Connor. Connor looked back. Then Parker reached for her drink. Tiny. Almost nothing. But Timothy saw it. He changed the subject immediately. On the drive home, Parker removed her heels and rested her feet against the floorboard. "You were quiet tonight." "I'm usually quiet." "You could have tried harder with Connor." Timothy kept his eyes on the road. "I thought we got along." "He was making conversation." "So was I." Parker looked out the window. "He could be important for my career." Timothy nodded. "Then I'm glad I didn't punch him." Parker turned sharply. Timothy smiled. "Joke." She relaxed. "Not funny." The traffic light ahead changed green. Timothy drove. At home, Parker went upstairs first. Timothy entered the office. He opened the black notebook. For the first time, he wrote Connor Blake's name. Connor Blake, Regional Vice President, Bellweather Medical Solutions. He added the Briarstone comment. He added the bracelet. Then the photograph reflection. He stared at the entries. Individually, they were weak. Together, they formed something. Not proof. A direction. Timothy closed the notebook. The following morning, he went outside to retrieve a socket wrench from the garage. Parker's Lexus was unlocked. The rear passenger door stood slightly open. He did not touch it. Then he noticed something on the floor behind the driver's seat. A folded receipt. Timothy could read the top line without entering the vehicle. Briarstone Hotel. He stood still. Parker appeared in the kitchen doorway behind him. "Tim." Timothy turned. She held her coffee with both hands. "What are you doing?" "Looking for my wrench." Her eyes moved toward the open Lexus door, then back to him. Timothy picked up the wrench from his workbench. "Found it." He walked past her. Behind him, this car door closed. Timothy did not need to look back. The man in the photograph finally had a name. And Timothy was beginning to understand why that name kept appearing near places Parker claimed she had visited alone. The story they were building. The arguments began 3 days after the Bellweather reception. At first, Timothy almost missed the pattern. Tuesday evening, Parker stood at the kitchen counter sorting mail while Timothy replaced the batteries in a smoke detector. "You know what Connor made last year?" Timothy kept working. "No." "Almost 300,000. Good for Connor." Parker dropped an envelope onto the counter. "That's not the point." Timothy climbed down from the step stool. "What is the point?" "Nothing." She gathered the mail and walked away. 2 nights later, it happened again. Timothy was washing a skillet after dinner when Parker entered the kitchen. "You've been at Triangle how long?" 9 years. "And you're still doing basically the same thing." Timothy turned off the faucet. "I supervise 12 buildings now." "You know what I mean." "No, what do you mean?" Parker crossed her arms. "You never wanted more." Timothy dried his hands. More. He considered the word. He had a house nearly 2/3 paid off, a retirement account, a daughter at NC State, health insurance, a job that let him leave before 6 most nights. For Timothy, those things had once been the definition of more. "I like my work," he said. "That's convenient." "Why?" "Because liking something means you never have to admit you've settled." Timothy watched her. There was something unusual about the conversation, not the criticism. Parker had made comments about his career before. This felt different, prepared. Her phone sat on the counter between them, screen facing upward. The microphone end pointed toward Timothy. He looked at it once, then back at Parker. Maybe coincidence. He would treat it as one. "You want me to find another job?" he asked. "I want you to have some ambition." "I thought this was about whether I liked my job." "See, you always do this." "Do what?" "Turn everything into an interrogation." Timothy almost smiled at the irony. Instead, he picked up the skillet. "I'm not interrogating you." Parker stared at him. "You don't even care." Timothy placed the skillet in the drying rack. "About what?" "Anything." The phone remained on the counter. Timothy understood the invitation. Raise his voice. Tell her she was lying. Mention the underwear. Mention Connor. Give the argument somewhere explosive to go. He refused. "I'm tired, Parker." She gave a short laugh. "Of course." Timothy left the kitchen. 10 minutes later, he returned for water. The phone was gone. He wrote the conversation that night. Not every word. Only what mattered. Argument regarding employment. Parker's phone positioned on kitchen counter during conversation. Possible recording. Unconfirmed. He underlined the last word. Unconfirmed. On Saturday, Emily came home for lunch. Parker was already irritated before she arrived. A contractor had quoted $4,800 to repaint the exterior trim and replace several sections of damaged siding. Timothy thought the price was reasonable. Parker disagreed. "You could do half of it yourself." "I could." "So why don't you—" "Because it would take me 3 weekends." Parker shook her head. "You always have an excuse." Emily looked up from her plate. "Mom." "What?" "Dad works all week." "So do I." Timothy placed his fork down. "Emily." She looked at him. "Don't." "But she's acting like you don't do anything." "This isn't your argument." Parker pushed her chair back. "I'm not arguing." Timothy said nothing. Emily looked between them. The silence became heavy. Parker picked up her glass. "You know, I've carried this family financially for years." Timothy felt the sentence more than he showed it. He knew the numbers. He knew who paid what. He also knew this was not the place to discuss them. Not in front of Emily. "You'd have nothing without me," Parker said. Timothy looked at her. Her phone was beside her plate. Again. He did not know whether it was recording. He didn't need to know. "I heard you," he said. "That was all." Parker stared at him. Emily lowered her eyes. Lunch ended 20 minutes later. After Parker went upstairs, Emily found Timothy in the garage. "Why do you let her talk to you like that?" Timothy tightened a clamp around a garden hose. "Your mother is angry." "At what?" "I don't know yet." Emily studied him. "That's a weird answer." "It's the truthful one." "Are you mad at her?" Timothy stopped working. He looked at his daughter. "Yes." Emily seemed surprised. "You don't act like it." "Being angry and acting angry aren't the same thing." She was quiet. Timothy picked up the hose. "Go worry about your exams." "You're impossible." "I've been told." That afternoon, after Emily returned to campus, Timothy called Benjamin. They met Monday evening at Benjamin's office on Glenwood Avenue. The office occupied the second floor above a small insurance agency. Benjamin had 2 employees, 3 filing cabinets, and a whiteboard covered with transaction dates from another case. Timothy handed him copies of records from accounts Timothy legally shared with Parker. Benjamin looked through them. You didn't access anything solely in her name. No. Good. He examined the statements. 20 minutes passed. Then Benjamin stopped. What is Red Oak Strategic Partners? I don't know. 3 payments. He rotated the statement. 7,500, 9 and 100, $12,000. Total 28,600. The transfers had originated from an account visible through the Masons' shared household banking dashboard because it was linked for bill management. Timothy had noticed the withdrawals. He had not noticed the recipient. Benjamin tapped the page. Public business records are public. He opened his laptop. Within minutes, the North Carolina Corporate Registry returned a company. Red Oak Strategic Partners, LLC. Registered office, Raleigh. Manager Connor Blake. Timothy stared at the screen. He felt no satisfaction, only another piece sliding into place. What does the company do? Timothy asked. Listed as business consulting. Could be legitimate. Absolutely. Benjamin looked at him. Does Parker work with him? He's her regional vice president. Benjamin leaned back. Then don't guess. Timothy nodded. Benjamin pointed at the figures. All this tells us is money moved from an account connected to Parker to a company managed by Connor Blake. Nothing else? Nothing else. Timothy appreciated the precision. On Wednesday morning, he called Collins and Whitmore. He had found the firm through a professional referral Benjamin trusted. Rebecca Collins met him Thursday at 200. Her office overlooked Fayetteville Street in downtown Raleigh. She was 48, with silver beginning at her temples, and the habit of reading documents completely before asking questions. Timothy liked that immediately. He gave her the notebook, not the original, a clean copy of the timeline. Rebecca read for almost 15 minutes. She asked about the underwear, the hotel charges, Charlotte, the house valuation, the trust, Connor, Red Oak. Then she asked about Parker's recent arguments. Timothy described them. Has she threatened divorce? No. Asked you to leave the house? No. Accused you of infidelity? No. Violence? Never. Rebecca tapped her pen against the paper. Any history of you losing your temper? Define losing it. Breaking things, threatening her, blocking doors, screaming? No. Any police calls? No. Counseling records involving anger? No. She nodded. Good. Timothy didn't like the word. Why good? Because if this becomes litigation, behavior matters. He looked at her. Do you think she's preparing for divorce? Rebecca did not answer immediately. She turned back several pages. What does Parker know about your father's trust? Not much. Does she think it's yours? Emily said Parker made it sound like I was hiding millions. Rebecca wrote something. Do you personally control those assets? No. Can you liquidate them? No. Borrow against them whenever you want? No. Rebecca nodded. Then she looked at the timeline again. Timothy, are you certain she's preparing to leave you? No. Rebecca closed the folder. Because this doesn't look like someone simply preparing to leave. Timothy waited. Rebecca's voice remained flat. Professional. This looks like someone preparing for you to leave first. Timothy did not move. Rebecca continued. If she expects confrontation, and if she's anticipating a dispute over assets, then your reaction could become part of the story. Timothy thought about the phone on the kitchen counter. The arguments. You never wanted more. You've settled. You'd have nothing without me. He had believed Parker was trying to hurt him. Now another possibility appeared. Maybe hurting him was not the objective. Maybe the objective was getting him to react. Timothy looked through Rebecca's office window at downtown Raleigh below. Cars moved through the intersection. People crossed Fayetteville Street carrying briefcases and coffee. He thought about the underwear again. How easy it would have been. Hold it up, demand a name, shout, throw something. Give Parker exactly the version of him she might have been waiting for. Rebecca slid the timeline back across the desk. From this point forward, she said, don't think about winning arguments. Timothy picked up the folder. What should I think about making sure the truth survives them? Timothy left the building at 3:06. He sat inside his Ford without starting the engine. For weeks he had believed he was quietly discovering Parker's secrets. Now he understood something colder. While he had been building a timeline of her behavior, Parker might have been building a version of Timothy. And if Rebecca was right, the next thing Parker needed was for him to become exactly the man her story required. The trap was supposed to be. Timothy Rebecca Collins gave Timothy one instruction before he left her office. Don't change who you are. Timothy paused with his hand on the door. I wasn't planning to. I mean it. Don't suddenly become secretive. Don't start moving money. Don't empty accounts. Don't make threats. Don't leave your house because you're angry. Timothy nodded. Rebecca closed the folder containing his timeline. And don't assume we're right. That mattered. Timothy turned back. About Parker preparing something. About everything. Rebecca folded her hands. We have suspicious behavior. We have inconsistent statements. We have financial questions. We have Connor Blake. None of that gives us permission to invent the missing pieces. Timothy understood. That was exactly how he had once worked. Evidence first, theory second, action last. He drove home through late afternoon Raleigh traffic and found Parker's Lexus already in the driveway. Nothing changed that evening. Timothy grilled chicken. Parker opened a bottle of wine. They watched half an episode of a crime series before Parker went upstairs. It almost felt normal. That was becoming the strangest part. A marriage could be collapsing without making a sound. Over the next week, Timothy began organizing records, not hiding them, preserving them. He downloaded 12 months of statements from their joint checking account, mortgage records, home equity documents, their shared credit card, insurance statements, property tax bills. He made an inventory of major household assets, the Lexus, his Ford, furniture, appliances, tools, retirement accounts, the remaining mortgage, Emily's education savings. He did not assign blame. He assigned dates and numbers. On Tuesday evening, Parker found him at the dining room table with a stack of statements. What are you doing? Timothy looked up. Organizing finances? Since when? Since I realized our filing cabinet looks like a landfill. Parker glanced at the papers. What finances? Household. She walked closer. Timothy did not cover anything. Every document in front of him involved accounts he legally shared or records belonging to him. Parker picked up the mortgage statement. You've been thinking about refinancing. Timothy watched her. The question was useful. He could mention the bank letter. He could ask why she had requested the valuation. Instead, he said, I've been thinking about whether our interest rate still makes sense. Parker placed the statement down. We should probably simplify everything. How? Combine the accounts. Timothy leaned back. Which accounts? All of them. We already share most household accounts. Not everything. There it was. Timothy waited. Parker continued. Your investment accounts, retirement, whatever your father left. My retirement account is in my name because it's through work. You know what I mean. Not exactly. Parker crossed her arms. The family money. Timothy looked at her. What family money? She gave a short laugh. Don't do that. Do what? Pretend it doesn't exist. Timothy said nothing. Parker's expression tightened. If we're married, why shouldn't everything be transparent? Transparency isn't the same as combining ownership. That's a very convenient distinction. Timothy glanced at the kitchen counter. Her phone was there. Face up? Again? He looked back at Parker. I'm not changing financial structures tonight. Why not? Because there's no reason to. Unless you're hiding something. Timothy felt his pulse move once against his throat. He kept his hands flat on the table. What do you think I am hiding? Parker stared at him. You tell me. No? Her eyebrows lifted. No? If you're accusing me of something, say what it is. Parker reached for her phone. Forget it. She walked upstairs. Timothy remained at the table. He looked at the mortgage statement, then toward the stairs. For the first time, Parker had brought his father's assets into an argument directly. The following morning, Timothy added the conversation to his notebook. He did not write motive. He wrote words. Parker proposed combining all accounts, referenced father's assets, accused Timothy of possibly hiding something. He closed the notebook and went to work. At 10:42, an email from Parker arrived. Subject house expenses. It contained a spreadsheet. Paint, roof maintenance, landscaping, insurance, property taxes. At the bottom, Parker had written, "Since I carry most of our financial burden, we need to discuss a fairer arrangement." Timothy read the sentence twice. Then he opened the household records. Over the previous 12 months, Parker had earned considerably more than he had. That part was true, but income was not contribution. Timothy had paid $19,440 toward the mortgage from his payroll deposits. He had covered most utilities. He had contributed $6,000 to Emily's education account. He had paid property taxes from a savings account funded over several years. He had personally completed repairs that would have cost thousands in labor. He did not send Parker a rebuttal. He saved the email. That evening, Bellweather sent employees a routine internal notice. Timothy would never have seen it except Parker printed it at home. The page sat beside the printer. Bellweather Medical Solutions was conducting a review of regional sales expense reimbursements for the previous fiscal year. Nothing on the notice accused anyone. It described the process as part of updated internal controls. Timothy read only what was visible. Then he walked away. Parker came downstairs 10 minutes later. She saw the paper. Her hand stopped. She picked it up immediately. Timothy was sitting in the living room. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Work." She folded the notice. "Problem point?" "No." Her answer came too quickly. Timothy said nothing. The next day he called Benjamin. They met Saturday morning. Benjamin spread copies of the financial records across his office conference table. "Look at these dates." Timothy moved closer. Benjamin pointed to the 3 known Red Oak transfers. Then he placed a second sheet beside them. "These are charges from your joint card. Hotel, meals, parking." Timothy followed the sequence. January 13th, February 10th, March 17th. Now look at the Red Oak payments. Several occurred within days of those trips. Timothy frowned. "Correlation isn't proof." "Correct." Benjamin pointed to another set of entries. "And these?" They were reimbursement deposits from Bellweather appearing in household records Parker had previously designated as business expense repayments. Timothy compared the dates. A pattern appeared. Travel expense, reimbursement, transfer, not every time. Enough times to be interesting. "What does it mean?" Timothy asked. Benjamin shook his head. "Right now?" "Right now." "It means there are dates worth remembering. Nothing else." "Nothing else." Timothy nodded. Benjamin leaned back. "If Bellweather is auditing expenses, they'll have records we don't. Receipts. Receipts. Approval chains, expense reports, corporate card data, maybe hotel invoices." Timothy stared at the pages. "Should I contact them?" "No," Benjamin answered immediately. Timothy looked at him. "Why?" "Because you don't know what happened." Benjamin tapped the paper. "If Parker and Connor did something improper, Bellweather has auditors whose job is to determine that. If they didn't, you calling the company because you suspect your wife is cheating could make you look vindictive." Timothy knew he was right. So I wait. You preserve your records. Benjamin gathered the sheets. And you wait. On Monday night, Parker tried again. Timothy was reading in bed when she entered the bedroom. We need to talk. He closed the book. Okay. She remained standing. I don't think this marriage is working. The words landed differently than Timothy expected. No shock, just wait. Why? You don't trust me? Timothy almost laughed. He didn't. What makes you say that? You've been going through finances. Our finances. You've become secretive. Timothy looked at her. I'm sitting in our bedroom reading a book. You know what I mean. No, I don't. Parker's jaw tightened. Sometimes talking to you is impossible. She turned toward the door, then stopped. I think you resent my success. Timothy said nothing. Parker looked back. See? What do you want me to say? The truth. Timothy held her gaze. So do I. The room went quiet. Parker left. Timothy remained on the bed. He did not follow. He did not argue. He did not ask about Connor. At 11:16, he opened his notebook. He wrote the date. Then Parker's exact words as closely as he remembered them. I don't think this marriage is working. You don't trust me. You've become secretive. You resent my success. Timothy stared at the page. Rebecca's warning returned. Your reaction could become part of the story. The following afternoon, Benjamin called. Timothy answered from a mechanical room at Triangle Medical Properties. What happened? I checked one more thing. Timothy stepped away from the humming air handler. Public records. Yes. Benjamin paused. Red Oak was formed 8 months ago. Timothy waited. 2 months before the first hotel charge we've identified. Timothy said nothing. Benjamin continued. I can't tell you what the company was used for. I can't tell you whether those transfers are legitimate. But I can tell you this. What? Whatever they're doing, they're leaving a trail. Timothy looked through the mechanical room window at the parking lot below. For weeks, he had been resisting the urge to act. Now he understood that waiting was not the absence of action. Parker had wanted arguments. He had given her none. Someone had looked into the house. He had preserved the record. Someone had searched for family money. He had documented the trust. Money had moved toward Connor's company. He had kept the statements. And now Bellweather itself was examining expense reimbursements. Timothy did not need to break down a door. He did not need to expose Parker at work. He did not need to chase Connor through Raleigh. Systems were already moving. Banks kept records. Companies kept receipts. Courts required disclosures. Transactions carried dates. People could change stories. Documents were harder to persuade. Timothy returned to his desk after the call. He opened the black notebook. At the bottom of the latest page, he wrote one sentence. Do not interrupt the trail. Then he closed it. For the first time since finding the underwear, Timothy understood the shape of the trap. Parker may have expected him to explode. She may have expected him to leave. She may have expected an angry husband she could point to later. Instead, Timothy Mason was still sitting exactly where she had left him, quiet, watching. And somewhere inside Bellweather, medical solutions auditors had started asking questions Timothy had never needed to ask himself. A dinner for 4. Parker mentioned dinner on Thursday morning. Timothy was standing at the kitchen counter spreading peanut butter across toast when she walked in already dressed for work. Are you free Saturday? He looked at her. I think so. Connor wants to have dinner. Timothy stopped moving for half a second. Connor. And Claire. Who's Claire? His fiancée. That was new. Timothy put the knife down. Parker opened the refrigerator. They've been engaged since Christmas. Connor thought it might be nice for us to all have dinner. Why? Parker turned. Why does there have to be a reason? There doesn't. It's networking, Timothy. People spend time together outside the office. He took a bite of toast. Okay? Parker seemed surprised. Okay. What time? 7:30. Where? Sullivan's. Timothy nodded. Saturday at 7:30. She studied him for another second, then picked up her keys. After she left, Timothy stood alone in the kitchen. Connor had a fiancée. That fact changed nothing about the evidence, but it changed the shape of the damage. Until then, Timothy had thought mostly about himself. Parker, Emily, their marriage. Now another person existed on the edge of the same story, Claire Bennett. Timothy wrote her name nowhere. She was not evidence. Saturday evening, Sullivan's Steakhouse in downtown Raleigh was crowded enough that Timothy had to leave his Ford with the valet. Parker looked at the truck as they stepped away. You couldn't have washed it. It rained yesterday. That doesn't answer the question. Timothy handed the valet his key. It'll survive. Parker adjusted her dress. Connor notices things. So do I. She looked at him. Timothy opened the restaurant door. Connor and Claire were already seated. Connor stood when they approached. Timothy. They shook hands. Connor wore a dark jacket over an open-collar white shirt, the same silver watch, the same narrow leather bracelet. Claire Bennett sat beside him. She was 36, according to Parker's introduction, and worked in commercial interior design. She smiled easily. It's good to finally meet you. Likewise, Timothy said. Claire looked toward Parker. I've heard so much about both of you. Timothy pulled out Parker's chair. He wondered what she had heard. Dinner began normally. Steaks, wine for Parker and Claire, bourbon for Connor, sparkling water for Timothy. For 20 minutes, they discussed Raleigh restaurants and the construction near North Hills. Then Connor looked through the window toward the valet stand. That your Ford outside? Timothy nodded. Still running. Every morning. Connor smiled. What year is it? 14. That's commitment. It's a truck. I haven't kept a car longer than 3 years. Timothy cut his steak. I've noticed dealerships encourage that. Claire laughed. Connor smiled. I just figure you spend enough time in a car, you might as well enjoy it. I enjoy mine. Parker took a drink of wine. Timothy doesn't care about things like that. Connor looked at her. Probably healthier. Then he looked back at Timothy. Still, there's something to be said for enjoying the rewards. Rewards for what? Work. Timothy placed his fork down. My truck gets me to work. Connor laughed. Fair enough. The conversation shifted, but Timothy recognized the tone. Connor was not openly insulting him. He did not need to. Every question carried the same assumption. Timothy's life was smaller. His job was smaller. His ambitions were smaller. Parker rarely corrected it. Sometimes she helped. When Claire asked Timothy what he did, he explained that he supervised facilities operations for 12 medical properties. Parker added, basically, if an air conditioner dies, they call Timothy. Connor smiled. Timothy nodded. If 1,200 people lose air conditioning in July, they tend to care. Claire looked at him. That actually sounds stressful. It can be. Connor lifted his bourbon. Different kind of pressure from corporate work. Timothy looked at him. Pressure is pressure. Connor leaned back. I suppose? There it was again, the classification. Timothy let him keep it. The main course arrived. Claire began telling Parker about a design project in Richmond. That was when the first real crack appeared. I almost called Connor for restaurant recommendations, Claire said. He's basically lived in Richmond on Wednesdays lately. Timothy's fork stopped against the plate, only for a second. Connor reached for his glass. Not basically. Claire laughed. 3 Wednesdays in 6 weeks. 2. 3. Connor shook his head. Feels like 3. Timothy said nothing. January 13th, February 10th, March 17th, Wednesday. Durham charges, Briarstone. Parker's client dinners. Timothy took another bite. Claire looked toward him. Do you travel much? Not for work. Lucky. I like sleeping in my own bed. Parker's eyes moved toward him. Timothy kept eating. Later, Connor began discussing Bellweather's Charlotte Summit. That Thursday was brutal, he said. We finished the awards, then everybody disappeared. Parker reached for her wine. Claire asked, Was that the trip where you stayed through Saturday? The table became very quiet. Connor looked at Parker. Different trip. Parker spoke immediately. Charlotte is practically our second office this year. Claire nodded. Timothy drank his water. He remembered the public schedule, Tuesday through Thursday. Parker had told him Wednesday through Saturday. 2 unexplained days. Connor had just confirmed most employees left Thursday. Timothy felt the answer getting closer. Still, he said nothing. Dessert came. Parker ordered cheesecake. Claire excused herself to use the restroom. Connor checked his phone. Parker looked toward the bar. For several seconds, Timothy sat across from 2 people he increasingly believed had betrayed him. He felt anger, not hot anymore. Dense, heavy, controlled. Claire returned, smiling. Timothy looked at her and understood something unpleasant. If he confronted Parker and Connor at that table, Claire would become collateral damage. He could show hotel dates, mention the underwear, ask about Charlotte, watch expressions change, maybe get an answer. Maybe not. But he still lacked proof of exactly what had happened. And Claire deserved better than being used as leverage in Timothy's marriage. He finished his coffee. At 9:42, they left the restaurant. Claire and Parker walked ahead toward the valet stand. Connor slowed beside Timothy. Good dinner. Yeah. Connor slipped his hands into his pockets. Can I give you some advice? Timothy looked at him. You're going to anyway. Connor smiled. Fair. They walked several steps. Parker's talented. I know. Really talented. I know that too. Connor glanced toward her. Women like that don't slow down. Timothy waited. Connor continued. Sometimes people grow at different speeds. Timothy stopped walking. Connor stopped too. What are you saying? Nothing personal? Then say it clearly. Connor smiled again. Successful women sometimes outgrow husbands who stop evolving. Timothy looked at him. There it was. No disguise, no joke. Just contempt wrapped in advice. Timothy could feel his heartbeat. He imagined grabbing Connor by the jacket. One movement, one punch, one perfect story for Parker to tell later. Rebecca's voice returned. Your reaction could become part of the story. Timothy held Connor's gaze. That's possible. Connor blinked. He had expected something else. Timothy walked toward the valet stand. The Ford arrived first. Connor watched Timothy climb into it. Timothy drove home with Parker beside him. For the first 10 minutes, neither spoke. Then Parker said, You were rude to Connor. Timothy kept his eyes on Interstate 40. How? I saw you two talking. He gave me career advice. What did you say, but that I'd consider it? Parker stared at him. That's all. That's all. Her phone connected automatically to the Lexus-style interface mirrored through the Bluetooth system she had paired with Timothy's truck earlier that week. A notification sound came through the speakers. The dashboard lit. Connor Blake. Parker reached toward the screen. Too late. The preview appeared. He still doesn't know. Timothy saw every word. Parker canceled the notification. The cabin went silent. She looked out the passenger window. Timothy kept both hands on the steering wheel. 10 and 2, steady. He did not ask what Connor meant. He did not need to, not yet. The city lights passed across the windshield. Parker finally spoke. Connor was asking about Monday's meeting. Timothy looked at the road. I didn't ask. Silence again. They reached Cary at 10:18. Timothy pulled into the driveway. Parker got out before he turned off the engine. He remained inside. The dashboard went dark. For weeks, Timothy had been working with fragments, gray underwear, hotel charges, Charlotte dates, a bracelet, money, glances, arguments. Now he had something different. A direct message. 4 words. He still doesn't know. Timothy opened the black notebook after Parker went upstairs. He wrote the date, the time, the location, the sender, then the exact words. He still doesn't know. He stared at them. Connor Blake was no longer simply a man connected to suspicious dates. Parker was no longer simply a wife giving inconsistent explanations. Whatever the two of them believed, Timothy did not know they were discussing his ignorance between themselves. Timothy closed the notebook. For the first time, the betrayal was no longer a theory built from separate clues. Parker and Connor were hiding something together, and they still believed the quiet man in the old Ford had no idea. The envelope in the printer. The pages appeared on Tuesday morning. Timothy was leaving for work when he heard the printer running in the downstairs office. One page slid into the tray, then another, then a third. Parker was upstairs. The printer belonged to both of them. It sat beside the filing cabinet and had been connected to the household network for 6 years. Timothy stepped into the office. A 4th page emerged. He intended to place the stack beside Parker's laptop. Then he saw his name. Timothy Mason. He stopped. The first page looked like notes. Not a filed document. Not a court pleading. A heading near the top read, Preliminary Marital History. Timothy's eyes moved down the page. Financial control, limited career advancement, possible undisclosed inheritance, emotionally withdrawn, increasingly hostile when questioned about money. Timothy stood perfectly still. The printer hummed behind him. Another page came out. He picked it up. This one contained a list of possible marital assets. Cary residence, retirement accounts, vehicles, savings. Mason family portfolio estimated $4 to $6 million. Timothy read that line again. 4 to 6 million. He finally understood. Parker did not merely know his father's trust existed. She believed the money belonged to Timothy. Personally. The 3rd page was worse. Potential behavioral concerns. Anger regarding wife's professional success. Controlling behavior concerning household finances. Possible concealment of inherited assets. Timothy felt something cold move through him. The underwear had hurt. Connor had hurt. The message on the dashboard had removed most of the doubt Timothy still carried. But this was different. This was his life rewritten in bullet points. He thought about the kitchen arguments. You never wanted more. You resent my success. You'd have nothing without me. He remembered Parker's phone positioned on the counter. He remembered Rebecca's warning. Your reaction could become part of the story. Timothy placed the pages on the desk. For one dangerous moment, he wanted to take them upstairs. Wake Parker, put them in front of her, ask her how many months she had been building this version of him. Instead, Timothy checked his watch. 6:52 a.m. He needed to leave in 8 minutes. He read the documents once more. He did not remove them. He did not write on them. He did not photograph Parker's private laptop. He simply recorded what had appeared through their shared printer and called Rebecca from his truck. She answered on the 4th ring. Collins? It's Timothy. What happened? The home printer produced divorce notes. Rebecca became quiet. What kind of notes? My name, assets, behavioral allegations. Did you access Parker's computer? No. Email. No. Cloud storage? No. They printed automatically. Yes. Leave the originals where they are. Timothy looked through the windshield toward the house. I already did. Write down when you saw them and exactly how. I will, Rebecca paused. Anything significant? Timothy thought about the line. Mason family portfolio estimated $4 to $6 million. She thinks the trust is mine. Another pause. How certain are you? She listed it as a possible marital asset. Rebecca exhaled softly. Then we need the trust documents organized now. I have them. Good. And Timothy? Yes. Don't confront her about the pages. He watched Parker's bedroom light switch off upstairs. I wasn't planning to. At work, Timothy spent most of the morning inspecting a leaking chilled water line. He welcomed the physical problem. A valve had failed. Water escaped. The pressure gauge showed exactly what was wrong. At noon, he sat alone in the maintenance office. He opened the black notebook. Shared home printer, 6:47 to 6:51 a.m. Documents concerning possible divorce and marital assets printed without action by Timothy. He added the phrases he remembered, then stopped. He did not need to copy every accusation. He already knew the important part. Someone was preparing a case. At 2:16, Timothy called Margaret Mason. His aunt answered from her home outside Chapel Hill. Timothy, are you free tomorrow? Is Emily okay? She's fine. Margaret went quiet. Then this is about Parker. Timothy's hand tightened around the phone. Why would you say that? Come tomorrow. He arrived at Margaret's house at 6:30 Wednesday evening. She was 64, retired from a 30-year career in commercial banking, and still kept financial documents with a level of organization Timothy respected. Margaret poured coffee. Neither of them touched it. What did Parker ask you? Timothy said. Margaret looked at him. You already know she called. I know now. When? February. Timothy leaned back. February. 2 months before the underwear. What did she want? Margaret folded her hands. She asked how your father's assets were structured. Specifically, whether you could access the principal, whether the commercial holdings had been sold, whether you received annual distributions. Timothy stared at her. What did you tell her? That trust information was confidential. Did she say why she wanted it? She said you were being secretive about family finances. Timothy looked towards the window. The evening light had begun fading behind the trees. Margaret continued. She asked whether the trust was worth more than $5 million. Timothy looked back. What did you say? Nothing. Did she ask whether it would be considered marital property? Margaret's expression changed. Yes. That answer landed heavily. Timothy lowered his eyes. Parker had not become curious after their marriage started deteriorating. She had been asking legal-shaped questions months earlier. What exactly do I control? Timothy asked. Margaret gave him a look. You know the answer. I want to hear it clearly. You are a discretionary beneficiary. I am trustee. You cannot liquidate trust assets. You cannot direct investment sales. You cannot demand principal whenever you choose. And distributions, subject to the trust instrument and trustee discretion. So if someone believes I have $4 or $5 million sitting in an account, they're wrong. Timothy nodded. Margaret stood. She went to a cabinet and returned with a thick folder. Your father designed it that way intentionally. Timothy opened the folder. Property interests, municipal bonds, private equity holdings, investment accounts. The latest consolidated valuation was substantial. But the number did not make Timothy feel wealthy. It never had. It was not his checking account. It was a structure his father had built to protect assets beyond one generation. Margaret watched him. Are you getting divorced? I don't know. Does Parker have someone else? Timothy looked at the documents. I don't know enough to answer that. Margaret understood the sentence. She did not ask again. Before Timothy left, she said, "She called me twice." He stopped near the door. Twice. The second time, she asked whether you'd ever refused a distribution. Timothy frowned. Why? I don't know. When? March 18th. Timothy knew the date. He had seen it in the financial timeline, one day after a Briarstone hotel charge. He drove home without music. Parker was sitting on the couch when he entered. Where were you? Margaret's. Parker's eyes stayed on him. Why? She needed help moving some boxes. The lie tasted wrong. Timothy rarely lied, but Rebecca had told him he did not owe Parker details that could compromise legal preparation. Parker looked back at the television. How is she? Fine. Timothy went upstairs. The printer pages were gone. Thursday afternoon he met Rebecca. This time he brought complete trust documents and his updated timeline. Rebecca read Margaret's information twice. Did your aunt keep records of Parker's calls? Phone logs, probably. Don't ask her to produce anything yet. Timothy nodded. Rebecca closed the folder. What do you want out of this? The question surprised him. I don't know. Think about it. Timothy looked at the table. He could say revenge. He could say Parker's career, Connor's reputation, the house, money. Instead, three things came immediately. Emily stays out of it. Rebecca nodded. What else? Property gets handled according to the law. And Timothy looked at his notebook. The truth doesn't get replaced by whoever tells the better story. Rebecca held his gaze. That I can work with. At 4:38 Friday afternoon, Timothy was inspecting a rooftop HVAC unit when his phone vibrated. Rebecca, he answered. Timothy. Her voice had changed. Professional, sharper. We received something. He stepped away from the unit. What? Formal service is being arranged. Timothy already knew. Still, he asked. For what? Rebecca paused. But Parker filed for divorce this morning. The rooftop seemed suddenly very quiet. Timothy looked across Raleigh. Buildings stretched toward the horizon beneath a pale sky. What is she alleging? Financial concealment, controlling behavior, marital misconduct allegations are being reserved pending discovery. There are references to inherited assets. Timothy closed his eyes. The printer pages, the arguments, the phones, the questions to Margaret. None of it had been random. Rebecca continued. Don't contact Parker about the filing until we talk. I won't. We'll meet Monday. Okay. Timothy ended the call. He stood beside the rooftop unit for another minute. Then he returned to work. The temperature sensor still needed replacing. He replaced it, tested the system, recorded the reading. At 5:41, Timothy climbed down from the roof. He sat inside his Ford. The black notebook lay in the passenger seat. For weeks, he had been documenting a private suspicion. Now the conflict had entered a system where words required records, claims required answers, assets required documentation, stories met discovery. Timothy opened the notebook. He wrote one line. Parker filed first, then he closed it. Preparation was over. The story Parker had been building about Timothy Mason was no longer hidden in a printer tray. She had put it on paper. And now she would have to prove it. She expected him to panic. The papers arrived Monday at 6:43 p.m. Timothy was trimming a loose section of weather stripping around the garage door when a dark sedan stopped at the curb. A man stepped out holding a large envelope. Timothy knew before the man reached the driveway. Timothy Mason. Yes? The man confirmed his identity, handed him the documents, and left. No drama, No raised voices. Just paper. Timothy stood beneath the garage light with the envelope in his hand. Through the kitchen window, he could see Parker. She was watching. Timothy entered the house. Parker remained near the counter. Neither spoke. He placed the envelope on the kitchen table and opened it. Complaint for absolute divorce and equitable distribution. He read the first page, then the second, then every page after that. Parker stayed in the room. Timothy could feel her attention on him. The filing described a marriage that had become intolerable. It referenced financial secrecy, controlling behavior. A growing concern that Timothy had concealed substantial inherited assets. It portrayed Parker as the primary financial provider. Timothy reached the final page. He placed the papers neatly back on the table. Parker finally spoke. "Well?" Timothy looked at her. "I've read it. That's all you have to say?" "For now." Her mouth tightened. "You aren't surprised?" Timothy considered the question. "Should I be?" Parker stared at him. For a moment he thought she might mention Connor. She didn't. "I think you should stay somewhere else." Timothy stood. "I'll discuss that with Rebecca." "Rebecca?" "My attorney." The change in Parker's face lasted less than a second. But Timothy saw it. "You already have an attorney." "Yes?" "Since when?" Timothy gathered the papers. "Long enough." Parker folded her arms. "So you've been planning this?" "No." "Then why did you have a divorce lawyer before I filed?" Timothy held her gaze. "Because I knew something was wrong." "What does that mean?" "It means exactly what I said." Parker stepped closer. "Are you accusing me of something?" There it was. The opening. Timothy could have said Connor's name. He could have described the gray underwear, the Briarstone, Charlotte, the dashboard message. Instead, he tucked the papers beneath his arm. "I'm not discussing this without legal advice." Parker laughed once, cold. "Unbelievable." Timothy walked toward the stairs. Behind him, Parker said, "Running away again." He stopped. His hand rested on the banister. For several seconds, Timothy looked at the wall in front of him. Then he continued upstairs. He did not give her the argument. At 7-Eleven, he called Rebecca. She answered immediately. "You were served?" "Yes." "Any confrontation?" "She asked me to leave." "Did you?" "No." "Good. Don't abandon the residence impulsively. We need to evaluate the situation properly." Timothy sat on the edge of the bed. "I don't want to sleep beside her." "You don't have to." "The guest room?" "Reasonable for now." Timothy looked toward the closet. "She knows I already hired you." "That's fine." "She didn't like it." "I wouldn't expect her to." Rebecca's voice remained calm. "Tonight, do nothing dramatic. No moving money. No taking property. No posting anything online. No contacting Connor." "I wasn't going to." "I know, I'm saying it anyway." Timothy packed 3 shirts, work pants, toiletries, and his phone charger into a duffel bag. He carried it down the hallway. Parker stood in the bedroom doorway. "So that's it." "I'm sleeping in the guest room." "You could leave." "It's my house too." Parker shook her head. "You always have to control everything." Timothy stopped. He looked at her. For months, that sentence might have confused him. Now he heard it differently. Not because he knew Parker's motive. He still refused to pretend he could read her mind, but he understood what words could become once written into affidavits. "I'll be in the guest room," he said. He closed the door behind him. The next morning, Timothy went to work at 7:20. Nothing about his schedule changed. At lunch, Rebecca emailed him a list of documents needed for preliminary financial disclosure. Timothy already had most of them. That evening, he organized everything at the guest room desk: pay statements, tax returns, retirement balances, mortgage history, insurance, household contributions. His salary from Triangle Medical Properties was $78,400 a year. Parker earned nearly twice that with bonuses. On paper, the difference looked substantial. But Timothy's records told the rest. Over the previous year, $19,440 of his earnings had gone directly toward the mortgage. Another $6,000 had gone into Emily's education fund. He had paid utilities, property taxes, homeowners insurance, vehicle maintenance. He had no hidden luxury purchases, no unexplained offshore accounts, no secret investment portfolio. His Ford was worth less than some of Parker's handbags. Timothy almost smiled at that. The man described as financially dependent had spent years quietly paying bills. He had simply never announced each payment. 2 days later, Timothy sat across from Rebecca in her office. She reviewed the records. "This is good." "What?" "Consistency." She placed several statements beside each other. "Your deposits match employment records. Your spending matches your lifestyle. Contributions are documented." Timothy leaned back. "And the trust?" Rebecca opened the Mason Family Preservation Trust binder. "That will require careful handling, but the structure is clear." She pointed to the relevant sections. "You are a beneficiary. You are not the trustee. You do not have unilateral control of the principal. Parker thinks it's $4 to $6 million I hid." "Then Parker's assumption is going to meet the documents." Timothy looked at the binder. For years, Parker had occasionally teased him about being too simple. Old truck, cheap coffee, work boots. She apparently believed another Timothy existed behind that image. A man sitting on millions. A man pretending to be ordinary. The irony was that Timothy had never pretended. He simply did not measure his life through visible money. Rebecca closed the binder. "We respond with facts." "Nothing else?" "Nothing else." Friday afternoon, Parker came home early. Timothy was in the kitchen repairing a loose drawer handle. She dropped her handbag onto the counter. "Did you call Bellweather?" Timothy looked up. "No." "Don't lie to me." "I didn't." "They're auditing my expenses." "I know." Parker froze. "How?" "You printed the notice downstairs." Her expression hardened. "You read my work documents?" "It was sitting beside our printer." "How convenient." Timothy put the screwdriver down. "What happened?" "You tell me." "I don't know." "They're asking about Durham." Timothy felt the room change. He kept his expression still. "What about Durham?" Parker stared at him. "The Briarstone." There it was. She had said the name herself. Timothy waited. Parker continued. "They're questioning reimbursements." "Then answer them." "You think this is funny? No. You did this." Timothy shook his head. "I contacted nobody at Bellweather." "Connor thinks you did." The name hung between them. First time. Parker seemed to realize she had said it. Timothy did not react. "Why does Connor think that?" Parker picked up her handbag. "Forget it." "No." She looked back. "You brought his name into this." "He's my regional vice president." "I know." "Then stop making it sound suspicious." Timothy looked at her. "I didn't make it sound like anything." Parker walked upstairs. Timothy remained beside the kitchen drawer. His hands were steady. His heartbeat was not. "Connor thinks you did." Timothy repeated the sentence silently. Connor knew about Bellweather's audit. Connor believed Timothy might have triggered it. That meant Connor understood there was something Timothy could potentially report. Timothy still did not know exactly what. And he would not guess. Monday morning, Parker left before 7. At 9:23, Timothy received a call from Rebecca. "I've reviewed the preliminary requests from Parker's attorney. And they want extensive trust documentation." Expected. They also want records regarding your employment history. Timothy frowned. Why? Likely to support the argument about earning capacity and financial dependence. Timothy looked around the maintenance office. His safety certificates hung on one wall. Property schedules covered another. 9 years of work reduced to a line about limited career advancement. He felt something close to amusement. Give them what they're entitled to. That's the plan. And my old employment. If requested properly, yes. Timothy became quiet. His old employment records would show 14 years in corporate investigations and internal controls. Parker knew he had once worked in compliance. She had never understood how deep that work had gone. Rebecca heard the silence. Problem? No. Timothy. He looked at the black notebook beside his keyboard. No problem. Tuesday evening, Bellweather sent Parker another request. Timothy knew because she told him. She entered the guest room without knocking. They want supporting documentation for 18 months. Timothy closed the book he was reading. Okay. Hotel invoices, meal receipts, client names? He said nothing. Parker watched him. You really expect me to believe you had nothing to do with this? Yes. Why? Because it's true. She shook her head. You sit there acting calm like none of this affects you. Timothy looked at her. It affects me. Then act like it. There it was again, an invitation to perform anger. Timothy refused. What do you want me to do, Parker? For once, she had no immediate answer. She left. Timothy remained seated. Years earlier, he had watched internal audits begin exactly this way: a random sample, a control failure, an unusual reimbursement pattern, one receipt that did not match a calendar entry, then another. No angry spouse required, no anonymous tip. Systems generated their own questions. Timothy turned off the lamp. The room went dark, except for light beneath the door. Parker still believed someone had aimed Bellweather at her. She was looking for a person to blame. Timothy understood something she apparently did not. He had not started Bellweather's audit. He did not control it. And now that the auditors were asking for 18 months of receipts, neither did Parker. Evidence has no temper discovery began with 27 requests. Rebecca placed the packet on the conference table and pushed it toward Timothy. It was Thursday morning. Rain pressed against the windows of Collins and Whitmore's Raleigh office, turning Fayetteville Street below into a sheet of gray reflections. Timothy opened the packet. Bank accounts, retirement accounts, real estate, employment history, tax returns, inheritance, trust interests, vehicles, insurance, credit cards. The questions went back years. 27, Timothy asked. That's not unusual. Rebecca tapped one section. This is the part they care about. Timothy read it. All documents concerning any beneficial, equitable, legal contingent, discretionary, or other interest held by Timothy Mason in the Mason Family Preservation Trust. They're still chasing it. They're entitled to investigate the claim. Timothy closed the packet. And we give them what the law requires. All of it? All of what they're entitled to. Rebecca leaned back. That's the difference between disclosure and surrender. Timothy nodded. He had spent enough time around corporate investigations to understand. Good evidence did not need protection from examination, only alteration. He spent the weekend assembling records. He did not enjoy it. Every tax return felt like another private piece of his life being placed under fluorescent light. But by Sunday night, the financial picture was clean. His salary, his retirement contributions, mortgage payments, household expenses, the education account, the trust. Nothing dramatic. That was the point. On Monday, Margaret Mason provided certified trust documentation through Rebecca. The documents were precise. Margaret was trustee. Timothy was a discretionary beneficiary. He could not order the sale of trust assets. He could not withdraw principal at will. He could not pledge trust property as his own. He did not hold $4 to $6 million in a secret personal account. The fortune Parker's notes had implied existed was real in one narrow sense. The assets existed, but Parker's assumption about Timothy's control over them did not. Rebecca summarized it during their next meeting. The trust isn't disappearing. I know. But the version of it in Parker's filing is. Timothy looked at the documents. For months, Parker had treated him as if he were both financially inadequate and secretly wealthy. The contradiction would have been funny in another life. Rebecca opened another folder. Now we have their disclosures. Timothy looked up. Parker's. Yes. She handed him a stack. Timothy read slowly. Income, bonuses, retirement, personal banking, business reimbursements. Then he saw Red Oak Strategic Partners. The transfers were listed. 3 of them. The same $28,600 Benjamin had identified. Parker's explanation appeared beside the transactions. Professional consulting and career development services. Timothy read it twice. Rebecca watched him. You recognize the company? Connor Blake manages it. I know. Timothy looked up. How? Public records? He almost smiled. Rebecca continued. They're characterizing these as legitimate consulting expenses. Could they be? That's not my question to answer. Timothy nodded. He turned another page. Dates. That was what mattered. January 13th, February 10th, March 17th. The same dates kept returning. Briarstone charges. Durham parking. Bellweather reimbursements. Red Oak transfers, not always on the exact day, sometimes 2 days later, sometimes 4, but the cluster remained. Timothy placed the papers down. Benjamin saw this pattern. So did I. Does it prove anything? No. Rebecca's answer was immediate. It creates questions. Timothy appreciated that. Questions were enough. The divorce process would ask them. Bellwether's auditors would ask their own. Timothy did not need to supply the answers. Wednesday evening, Emily called. Timothy was in the guest room reviewing maintenance schedules for work. Dad? Something in her voice made him close the laptop. What's wrong? Are you hiding money from Mom? Timothy looked at the wall. No. She says there's a trust. There is. With millions in it, there are assets in the trust. So why did you tell me not to worry about it? Because it's not your responsibility. Emily became quiet. Then, Mom says you've controlled money for years. Timothy closed his eyes. This was the moment he had feared. Not court, not Connor, not the house. This. He could walk downstairs and retrieve a binder. He could send Emily screenshots. He could tell her about the underwear, the hotel, the Charlotte trip, Connor, Red Oak, the printer pages. He could destroy Parker's version of events in 10 minutes, maybe 5. Timothy opened his eyes. Emily, listen carefully. I'm listening. You are allowed to ask me anything. Okay. But I'm not going to make you choose between your parents. I'm not choosing. It can happen without you realizing it. Then tell me what's true. Timothy looked at the notebook on his desk. The trust exists, and Margaret controls it as trustee. I don't have millions sitting in a bank account that I can withdraw whenever I want. Did Mom know that? I don't know what your mother understood. That answer mattered. He would not put thoughts inside Parker's head. Emily exhaled. Did you control her money? No. Did you stop her from having accounts? No. Did you make her give you her paycheck? No. Silence. Then Emily asked, Is there someone else? Timothy's hand tightened around the phone. I won't discuss that with you right now. That means yes. It means I'm not discussing it. Dad. Emily. His voice stayed soft. This is your mother. I know. And whatever happened between us, that doesn't erase 19 years of her being your mother. Emily did not answer. Timothy continued. You don't need to defend me. But what if she's lying about you? Then facts will handle it. Emily gave a frustrated laugh. You sound like a lawyer. No, lawyers charge more. That finally got a small laugh from her. They spoke for another 10 minutes. School, exams, summer plans. When the call ended, Timothy sat in the dark guest room. He felt exhausted. Protecting Emily was harder than protecting money. Money could be divided. A daughter's trust in her parents could not. 3 days later, Emily came home. She did not announce why. Timothy found her sitting at the kitchen island with Parker. The conversation stopped when he entered. Hey, Timothy said. Emily looked at him. Mom said you refused to let her refinance the house. Parker stood. I didn't say it like that. Emily looked at her. You said Dad blocked you. Timothy put his keys down. I never received a refinance application to approve or reject. Emily turned toward Parker. You said he refused. Parker's face tightened. It was more complicated than that. Timothy stayed silent. Emily looked between them. For the first time, he saw something change. Not allegiance, doubt. And Timothy hated that too. He did not want Emily learning to distrust Parker. He wanted her outside this. But truth had a way of entering rooms without permission. Timothy went upstairs. He did not stay to watch. The next development came through Rebecca. She called Monday morning. I need you downtown this afternoon. What happened? Opposing counsel produced additional materials. What kind? Notes, statements, a chronology of alleged incidents. Timothy felt the old pressure beneath his ribs. What incidents? Arguments, financial disputes, alleged angry behavior. I'll be there at 2. Rebecca had the documents spread across the table when he arrived. Several incidents were familiar. The kitchen argument, the discussion about combining accounts, Parker's accusation that Timothy resented her success. Other descriptions were exaggerated beyond recognition. One entry claimed Timothy became visibly threatening when questioned about family assets. Timothy stared at it. He remembered standing at the dining table, his hands flat, his voice low. Then Rebecca slid another document toward him. Look at the file information. Timothy read the metadata summary. Creation date, modification date. He looked at the alleged incident date, then back to the creation date. The document describing Timothy's supposed angry reaction had been created 4 days before the argument occurred. He said nothing. Rebecca pushed another page toward him. Same problem. A written summary referenced Timothy becoming hostile during a discussion that had not yet happened when the file was first created. Timothy felt cold. Could this be a template? Possibly. Could the dates be explained? Possibly. Rebecca's expression remained controlled. We don't overstate it. Timothy nodded, but another document sat beneath it. A message Parker had apparently sent to a friend weeks before filing. Timothy read one line. Trying to get him to actually react is impossible. He's impossible to provoke. He stared at the sentence. Impossible to provoke. Later, Parker's chronology described him as routinely explosive. The contradiction sat on the table without raising its voice. Timothy leaned back. He thought about the phone positioned on the kitchen counter, the criticism, his salary, his truck, his ambition, the repeated invitations to fight. Rebecca watched him. You see the issue? Yes. Again, we don't claim more than we can establish. Timothy nodded. He had no intention of doing that. He no longer needed to. The documents were beginning to disagree with each other. Parker could describe him as angry. A prepared chronology could describe him as threatening. A filing could call him controlling. But dates existed. Bank records existed. Messages existed. And now some of those records appeared to show that the story of Timothy's anger had begun taking shape before the arguments themselves. He left Rebecca's office at 4:26. The rain had stopped. Timothy walked 2 blocks before returning to his Ford. He sat behind the wheel and opened the black notebook. For months he had filled it with observations, dates, amounts, words, no insults, no theories presented as facts, no revenge. He looked at the earliest entry. Charcoal gray men's boxer briefs. Size M. Ownership unknown. Timothy remembered how badly he had wanted to write, "Parker is cheating." He had not. That discipline seemed almost small then. Now he understood what it had protected. His credibility, his judgment, maybe even his future. Timothy closed the notebook. Anger could be challenged. Memory could be challenged. Stories could be rewritten. Evidence had one advantage over all of them. Evidence had no temper, and soon Parker would have to sit in a room where every version of her story could be placed beside the dates. The room where stories met records. Parker's deposition began at 9:03 on a Wednesday morning. Timothy was not in the room. Rebecca had recommended that he remain at work unless his presence became necessary. So while Parker sat in a conference room in downtown Raleigh, with attorney's exhibits and a court reporter, Timothy stood on the roof of a medical office building, replacing a failed condenser fan motor. At 10:26, his phone vibrated. He ignored it. At 10:51, it vibrated again. He finished tightening the mounting bolts before checking the screen. "Rebecca, call when free. Nothing urgent." Timothy waited until lunch. "How bad?" he asked. "For whom?" Timothy leaned against his Ford. "Rebecca. She's answering questions. That's what depositions are for." Rebecca paused. We have some useful admissions." Timothy said nothing. Parker acknowledged asking Margaret about the trust before the divorce filing. "Okay." She also acknowledged requesting preliminary refinance information. Timothy looked across the parking lot. "Did she explain why?" "She said she was evaluating household options." "Reasonable?" "Potentially," Rebecca continued. "She denied attempting to provoke you." Timothy remembered the message. Trying to get him to actually react is impossible. "What about the chronology?" "Her attorney objected to some questions. We got enough." Timothy looked down at his work boots. What does enough mean? It means she confirmed she had been drafting notes about marital conflict before several of the incidents described in the final chronology. Timothy was quiet. Rebecca's voice softened slightly. "This isn't television, Timothy. Nobody confessed." "I know." "Depositions are about locking testimony into place." "I know that too." "Good, go eat lunch." Timothy almost smiled. "Anything about Connor?" A pause. "Yes." The smile disappeared. "What?" Parker admitted she traveled with Connor outside normal Bellweather events. Timothy straightened. "Where? Durham, Charlotte, Richmond?" "Did she admit an affair?" "No." Timothy looked towards the building. "Then we still don't know." "We know more than we did yesterday." That was enough. For now. 3 weeks later, Timothy sat for his own deposition. Rebecca sat to his left. Across the table was Parker's attorney, Daniel Hargrove. Hargrove was in his early 50s, immaculate patient and better prepared than Timothy had expected. Timothy respected that. A court reporter sat near the end of the table. Hargrove began with ordinary questions. Name, age, address, employment. "Mr. Mason, what is your current position?" "Facilities maintenance supervisor for Triangle Medical." properties. Annual salary, $78,400 before overtime. Your wife earned substantially more than you. Yes. Has she earned substantially more for several years? Yes. Hargrove glanced at his notes. Would it be fair to say Mrs. Mason has been the primary financial provider? No. Hargrove looked up. Why not? Because income and household contribution are different questions. Rebecca remained silent. Hargrove leaned back. Explain. Timothy did. Mortgage contributions, utilities, property taxes, education savings, repairs, insurance, no speeches, just numbers. Hargrove moved on. Did you resent your wife's professional success? No. Never. No. You never felt inadequate because she earned more. Timothy considered the wording. I've felt inadequate about plenty of things in my life. Her paycheck wasn't one of them. Hargrove looked at him for a second, then continued. Did you control household finances? No. Did you monitor Mrs. Mason's spending? No. Did you examine her financial transactions? After I became concerned about our marriage, I reviewed accounts that were jointly held or legally accessible to me. When did you become concerned? Timothy looked at Rebecca. She gave no signal. He returned his eyes to Hargrove. April 11th. Why that date? The room became still. Timothy knew the question was coming. He had known for weeks. While cleaning my wife's Lexus, I found men's underwear beneath the rear passenger seat. Hargrove's expression barely changed. What did you do? Finished cleaning the car. You didn't confront her. No. Why? I didn't know who they belonged to. Did you suspect infidelity? Yes. But you said nothing. Correct. Hargrove leaned forward. Isn't that unusual? Maybe. Why wouldn't a husband confront his wife after finding another man's underwear in her vehicle? Timothy looked at him. Because suspicion isn't proof. Silence. The court reporter's fingers continued moving. Hargrove glanced down. When did you begin documenting your wife's behavior? That weekend. So you investigated her. I documented events. Isn't that an investigation? Sometimes. Hargrove looked toward Rebecca, then back. You have experience investigating people, don't you? Yes. What experience? 14 years in corporate investigations and internal controls. Hargrove paused. Parker had apparently told her attorney Timothy was a maintenance supervisor. That was true. It simply was not the whole truth. What kind of investigations? Fraud, procurement irregularities, expense manipulation, vendor schemes, internal policy violations. Did you use those skills against your wife? Timothy's jaw tightened slightly. No. You kept a timeline? Yes. You reviewed transactions? Joint transactions. You contacted a forensic accountant? An old colleague? You hired an attorney before Mrs. Mason filed? Yes. Hargrove folded his hands. That sounds like an investigation. Timothy considered his answer. It sounds like preparation. For divorce. For facts. Hargrove stared at him. Timothy stared back. The questioning continued for almost 4 hours. The trust came next. How much is it worth? I don't know the current exact valuation. More than $4 million. Possibly. More than 5. Possibly. And you're telling us you don't consider yourself wealthy. That wasn't the question. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. Do you control those assets? No. Can you receive distributions? Under the terms of the trust. So yes, under the terms of the trust and trustee discretion. Your aunt is trustee. Yes. Someone close to you. Yes. Someone who could give you money, if authorized under the trust. Hargrove pushed. Timothy did not. By 3:30, they reached Connor. Did you threaten Connor Blake? No. Contact him after the separation? No. Contact Bellweather? No. Report your wife to Bellweather? No. Report Connor Blake? No. Attempt to damage either person's employment? No. Follow them? No. Place a tracker on Mrs. Mason's car? No. Access her private email? No. Break into her phone? No. Hargrove stopped. For the first time all afternoon, there was nowhere obvious for the question to go. Timothy had done almost nothing dramatic. That absence had become evidence, too. The deposition ended at 4:07. Outside the conference room, Rebecca handed Timothy a bottle of water. You did fine. Timothy drank half of it. I hate depositions. Everyone does. Did he get anything useful? Of course. Timothy looked at her. Rebecca smiled slightly. Good lawyers always do. They walked toward the elevator. Then Rebecca's phone rang. She checked the screen. 1 second. Timothy waited. Rebecca answered. She listened without speaking for nearly a minute. Her expression changed, not dramatically, just enough. Send it to me, she said. She ended the call. What happened? Timothy asked. Bellweather. Timothy felt his stomach tighten. What about them? Through counsel, they've responded to a subpoena concerning reimbursement records relevant to Parker's financial disclosures. The elevator doors opened. Neither moved. Rebecca continued. They produced hotel folios. Timothy said nothing. Briarstone. Yes. Whose name? Connor Blake's. The hallway seemed suddenly narrow. Timothy looked at Rebecca. And Parker? Her Bellweather expense submissions appear to include charges associated with the same stays. Timothy breathed slowly. Could be work. Could be. Rebecca's tone warned him not to jump. He nodded. What else? There are room service records. Timothy waited. 2 breakfasts on multiple mornings. That still did not prove an affair. Timothy knew it. Rebecca knew it. 2 people could eat breakfast in a hotel room for reasons that had nothing to do with sex. But the dates mattered. January 13th, February 10th, March 17th, Wednesdays. The same nights Parker had told Timothy she was at client dinners. Rebecca stepped into the elevator. Timothy followed. Before the doors closed, she said, There's more. What? Bellweather's auditors found reimbursement submissions connected to Red Oak. Timothy turned toward her. Connor's company. Yes. The elevator descended. Rebecca looked at the file on her phone. Some of the consulting charges appear to have been submitted as client development expenses. Timothy felt the pieces move again. The affair had been one trail. The money had been another. Now they were touching. What happens next? Bellweather handles Bellweather. And the divorce. We use admissible records where they're relevant. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. Timothy stepped outside. Rebecca remained beside him. One more thing. He stopped. The hotel produced parking records. Timothy looked at her. Vehicles. License plates. He already knew what she was going to say. Still, he waited. Connor's BMW entered the Briarstone garage at 6:14 p.m. on March 17th. Timothy said nothing. Rebecca continued. Parker's Lexus entered 11 minutes later. Timothy looked through the glass doors toward Fayetteville Street. For months he had wondered whether the underwear had an innocent explanation, whether the hotel charges could be business, whether Charlotte had another explanation, whether Connor's message meant something less damaging than it sounded. He had forced himself to leave room for doubt. That discipline had protected him. Now the room was getting smaller. Rebecca's phone vibrated again. She looked at the screen. Her eyes stayed there longer this time. "What?" Timothy asked. Rebecca turned the phone toward herself before answering. "Bellweather has placed both Parker and Connor on administrative leave." Timothy absorbed the words. No satisfaction came. No victory. Only the strange stillness that follows when something long suspected finally becomes visible. He thought about Connor at Sullivan's. Successful women sometimes outgrow husbands who stop evolving. Timothy had almost punched him. Instead, he had walked away. Now Connor's own employer was asking the questions. Rebecca put the phone away. "Go home, Timothy." He nodded. But as he walked toward his old Ford, another thought followed him. Bellweather had found expense irregularities. The hotel had produced parking records. The divorce process had forced disclosures. 3 separate systems had begun comparing the same dates, and for the first time Timothy wondered what would happen when Claire Bennett saw them too. What the underwear actually cost. Bellweather terminated Connor Blake on a Monday. Timothy learned about it from Rebecca, not Parker. He was standing in the loading area behind Triangle Medical Properties when her call came through at 11:37. "Bellweather completed the employment portion of Connor's review," Rebecca said. Timothy moved away from a delivery truck. "And he's out. For the affair?" "No." The answer mattered. Rebecca continued. "Darn. The information we've received indicates policy violations involving expense submissions undisclosed, financial conflicts, and Red Oak strategic partners." "Anything criminal?" "Nothing I'm prepared to call criminal." Timothy nodded even though she could not see him. "And Parker?" "Still on administrative leave." Timothy looked towards the building. He expected satisfaction. For months, Connor had treated him like a man too small to matter. The old Ford, the maintenance job, the cheap suit. Successful women sometimes outgrow husbands who stop evolving. Timothy had remembered every word. Now Connor had lost the executive title he wore like armor. Timothy felt almost nothing. "What happens next?" he asked. "With Bellweather, their decision?" "With us?" "Settlement conference Friday." That was the system Timothy cared about now. The marriage was over. Chum. The remaining question was whether it ended with facts or with the distorted version Parker had tried to establish. Friday morning, Timothy sat beside Rebecca at a polished conference table. Parker sat across from him with Daniel Hargrove. Timothy had not been this close to her for nearly 3 weeks. She looked tired. No Bellweather badge, no expensive work bag. Just a Navy folder and a legal pad. Hargrove began with the house. The latest appraisal placed the Carey property at $751,000. Mortgage balance, $283,600. After estimated sale expenses, the remaining equity would be divided according to the negotiated settlement. Then came retirement accounts, vehicles, savings, household debt. The numbers were ordinary, large enough to matter, small enough to understand. The imaginary fortune was absent. Hargrove eventually reached the trust. "We acknowledge the documentation concerning trustee control," he said. Rebecca nodded. "And?" Hargrove glanced toward Parker. "We're withdrawing the position that the trust principal should be treated as a directly controlled marital asset." Timothy remained still. Months of suspicion about hidden millions disappeared in one sentence. Not because Timothy had argued louder, because the documents were clear. The settlement moved forward. Parker would receive her lawful share. Timothy would receive his. Neither would leave with everything. Neither would leave with nothing. That was less dramatic than revenge. It was also real. After nearly 2 hours, Hargrove requested a break. Timothy walked into the hallway. Parker followed several seconds later. Timothy. He stopped. She stood 10 feet away. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Parker said, "Connor was fired." "I heard." "You happy?" "No." She seemed almost irritated by the answer. "He thinks you caused the audit." "I didn't." "I know that now." Timothy studied her face. There was no victory in being believed months late. Parker looked toward the conference room door. Bellweather had automated flags on duplicate expense categories. Timothy said nothing. They expanded the review after they found Red Oak. Again, he said nothing. Parker folded her arms. "You're not going to ask? Ask what about Connor?" Timothy looked at her. "I already know enough." Her expression changed. "Do you—" Timothy could feel the old pain beneath the question. The gray underwear, the Lexus, the hotel, the message, the lies. But the pain had changed. It no longer demanded an answer immediately. "Did you have an affair with him?" Timothy asked. Parker looked at the carpet, then back at him. "Yes." One word, that was all. Timothy had imagined hearing it many times. In some versions he shouted. In others, Parker cried. Sometimes Connor was present. Sometimes Timothy walked away before she finished. Reality was quieter. "How long?" he asked. 7 months. Timothy calculated automatically. The affair had begun well before the underwear, before the refinance inquiry, before Margaret's calls, before the arguments. He nodded once. "Okay?" Parker stared at him. "Okay? What do you want me to say?" "I don't know." Neither did Timothy. The confession did not give him certainty. He already had certainty. It simply put Parker's voice beside the records. Rebecca opened the conference room door. "We're ready." Timothy turned. Parker spoke before he walked away. "The underwear." He stopped. She looked at him. "That's how you knew." Timothy faced her. "That's how I started asking questions." Parker's eyes stayed on him. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I didn't know the truth yet." Rebecca waited by the door. Timothy returned to the conference room. The sentence stayed behind him. Settlement negotiations continued. By late afternoon, they had a framework. The house would be sold unless one party refinanced and bought out the other's agreed equity share within 60 days. Timothy did not want it. That surprised Parker. It surprised him too. For years, the Carey house had represented stability. Emily's childhood, Christmas mornings, weekend repairs, a pencil mark inside the pantry where Timothy had recorded Emily's height when she was 8. But keeping the building would not preserve the life that happened inside it. "I'll sell," Timothy said. Rebecca looked at him. "You're sure?" "Yes." Parker said nothing. The Lexus would remain Parker's. Timothy kept the Ford. Their retirement accounts would be adjusted under the negotiated terms. Joint savings would be divided. Each would assume specified debts. No hidden jackpot. No punishment disguised as mathematics. Just separation. That evening, Timothy called Emily. "We reached a settlement framework." She was quiet. "So it's really happening?" "Yes." "Are you okay?" Timothy looked around the guest room. Boxes had begun appearing along one wall. "I will be. Mom lost her job." Timothy paused. "She told you?" "Yesterday." Parker's administrative leave had apparently ended. Bellweather had terminated her employment after completing its internal review. Timothy sat down. "How is she?" "Not good." Timothy looked at the floor. Part of him remembered Parker laughing when Connor called her the ambitious one. Part remembered every remark about his salary. Part remembered the documents describing him as financially dependent. Still, he felt no pleasure hearing she had lost the career she had spent years building. "Stay close to her," he said. Emily sounded surprised. After everything, she's your mother. She lied about you. That doesn't change who she is to you. Emily became quiet. Dad? Yeah. Why didn't you tell me? About the affair. Everything. Timothy looked towards the black notebook. Because I didn't want my evidence to become your burden. Emily said nothing for several seconds, then softly, "Thank you." The call ended. 2 weeks later, Timothy heard about Claire. Benjamin mentioned it over coffee. Connor's engagement is over. Timothy looked up. How do you know? Raleigh is smaller than people think. Did Claire find out? Apparently. Timothy stirred his coffee. He had never contacted her, never sent hotel records, never forwarded messages, never used another betrayed person as a weapon. He was glad of that. Whatever Claire decided, she deserved to reach it through her own life, not Timothy's revenge. The final settlement documents arrived in June. Timothy signed them in Rebecca's office. Before he left, she handed him a copy. How does it feel? He considered the question. Expensive? Rebecca smiled. That's divorce? Timothy picked up the folder. At the door, Rebecca said, You know what saved you? He looked back. The trust documents? No. The financial records? Helped. Timothy waited. Rebecca pointed toward the black notebook under his arm. You never made your worst suspicion sound better than your best evidence. Timothy looked at the notebook. The first entry was still there. Charcoal gray men's boxer briefs. Size M. Ownership unknown. He had known what he believed. He had refused to write what he could not prove. That difference had carried him farther than anger ever could. The Carey house went on the market the following week. On Saturday morning, Timothy stood alone in the garage packing tools. The Lexus was gone. Parker had moved into an apartment 3 days earlier. Timothy looked toward the place where the white vehicle had once sat. Months ago, he had knelt there holding another man's underwear. At the time, he thought that small piece of fabric might cost him his marriage. He had been wrong. The underwear had cost him nothing. It had only exposed what was already being spent behind his back. Trust, time, respect, truth. Those were the expensive things. Timothy closed his toolbox. His phone rang. Benjamin. I have a question for you, Benjamin said. About what? Work. I have a job. Not that kind. Timothy stopped. Benjamin continued. I have a client who needs someone who knows how to look at records without falling in love with a theory. Timothy glanced at the black notebook sitting on the workbench. You're asking me to investigate again? I'm asking if you remember how. For the first time that morning, Timothy smiled. I never forgot. The quiet man returns to the table. Benjamin's client was a regional construction company in Durham called Harlan Ridge Development. The problem sounded simple. Money was disappearing. Not enough to threaten the company. Enough to bother the owner. Invoices from one electrical subcontractor had increased by nearly 18% in 11 months, while the number of active projects had barely changed. Benjamin wanted Timothy to review the records. No interviews, Benjamin said. No surveillance, just documents. They were sitting at a coffee shop near Research Triangle Park on Saturday morning. Timothy looked through the preliminary file. Purchase orders, invoices, vendor approvals, payment dates. How much work? Maybe 20 hours. I already have a full-time job. I know. Then why me? Benjamin drank his coffee. Because everybody else who looked at it decided what happened before they looked at the records. Timothy turned another page. And you think I won't? I watched you spend months refusing to call an affair when most men would have convicted half of Raleigh before breakfast. Timothy looked up. That's not a qualification. It's close? Timothy accepted the assignment. He worked at his dining table in a temporary apartment he had rented in Cary after the house sale closed. The apartment was smaller than the old house. 1 bedroom, 912 square feet. A narrow balcony overlooked a retention pond and a row of pine trees. Timothy liked it. There was nothing in it he did not need. A couch, a table, 4 chairs, though only 2 had been used, a television, his tools, books. The black notebook remained inside a desk drawer. For the first time in months, he was opening spreadsheets that had nothing to do with Parker. It felt good. By the 4th evening, Timothy found the pattern. The electrical subcontractor was not overbilling every project. That would have been obvious. Instead, small material surcharges appeared on change orders under $2,500, amounts low enough to avoid secondary approval. 37 transactions, total exposure 41,860. Timothy checked each one, then checked them again. He wrote a 3-page report. No accusation, no dramatic language, only transaction numbers, approval thresholds, dates, and recommended questions. Benjamin called the next afternoon. "You were right." "About what?" They interviewed the project manager. Timothy waited. He admitted routing work through a vendor owned by his brother-in-law. "Did he admit taking money?" "No." "Then don't say he did." Benjamin laughed. "There he is." "Who?" "The most annoying investigator in North Carolina." Timothy smiled. The work expanded. 1 project became 2. Then Benjamin referred him to another attorney. Timothy did not quit Triangle Medical Properties. Not immediately. He liked the job. He liked problems that could be solved with tools. But he began taking consulting assignments on evenings and occasional weekends. By August, he had earned $14,700 from work Parker would once have dismissed as looking at paperwork. He used part of it to replace the transmission in the Ford. Benjamin suggested buying something newer. Timothy declined. "The truck knows too much." Benjamin laughed. Life became quieter, not empty. Quiet. Emily came home from NC State twice a month. They ate at small restaurants. Sometimes she brought laundry. Sometimes Timothy pretended not to notice how much. She spoke about Parker carefully. Timothy never pushed. One Sunday afternoon, Emily sat on his balcony drinking iced tea. "Mom got another job." Timothy looked up from a book. "Where?" "A medical equipment distributor in Greensboro." "Good." Emily studied him. "That's it. What else should I say?" "I don't know." Timothy closed the book. "Do you want me to be angry that she's rebuilding her life?" "No." "Then good." Emily looked toward the pond. "She says she made a mess." Timothy said nothing. "She doesn't blame you anymore." He looked at his daughter. "Emily." "I know, not my business." "Exactly." She smiled faintly. "You're impossible." "I've heard that." The phrase reminded him of Parker's old message. Trying to get him to actually react is impossible. Once the sentence had been evidence. Now it was only history. In September, Timothy received the final divorce decree. He opened the envelope at his kitchen table. The marriage had lasted 22 years, 7 months, and 9 days. The legal ending occupied fewer than 20 pages. Timothy read every one. Then he placed the decree in a file. He did not drink. He did not celebrate. He did not call Parker. He drove to Jordan Lake. The afternoon was warm. He parked near a quiet section of shoreline and walked until the sound of the road disappeared. For a long time, Timothy sat on a weathered bench. He thought about the life that had ended. Not only the betrayal. That would have been easier. He remembered Parker at 27, laughing in a rented apartment because they had assembled a bookshelf backward. Parker holding newborn Emily. Parker asleep beside him during road trips. Parker dancing barefoot in the kitchen when they bought the Cary house. Those memories were true too. Timothy refused to let the final 7 months rewrite 22 years. Truth did not work that way. The good did not erase the betrayal. The betrayal did not erase everything that came before it. Both could exist. That was harder. It was also cleaner. He stayed until sunset. Then he drove home. 2 weeks later, Connor Blake called. Timothy almost did not answer. The number was unfamiliar. Timothy. He recognized the voice immediately. Connor sounded different. No ballroom confidence, no polished amusement. Connor. A pause. I wanted to talk. About everything. Timothy stood near his apartment window. I don't think we have anything to discuss. I owe you an apology. Timothy looked across the parking lot. You owe several people apologies. I know. Then start with them. Connor became quiet. I lost my job. I heard. Claire left. Timothy said nothing. My reputation is destroyed. Timothy's jaw tightened. Connor continued. Parker and I aren't together. That surprised Timothy less than he expected. Why are you telling me? I don't know. Timothy believed that might be the first completely honest thing Connor had ever said to him. Connor exhaled. I was arrogant. Yes. I thought you didn't see what was happening. I know. Another pause. Why didn't you confront me? Timothy looked at the reflection of himself in the window. 46 now. More gray at his temples. Same plain shirt, same quiet face. Because you weren't my problem. Connor said nothing. My marriage was my problem, Timothy continued. The financial records were Bellweather's problem. Your engagement was Claire's problem. I didn't need to become everybody's judge. Connor's voice lowered. You could have ruined me. Timothy almost smiled. No, Connor. He looked toward the desk where the black notebook remained closed. You did that part yourself. Timothy ended the call. He blocked the number. Then he made dinner. Chicken, rice, green beans, ordinary food in an ordinary apartment. He slept 8 hours. The next morning, Triangle Medical Properties held a quarterly operations meeting. Timothy sat near the end of the table. His director, Marcus Reed, announced that the company was creating a new position, Director of Risk and Facilities Compliance. The role would combine building operations, vendor oversight, procurement review, and internal controls across 29 properties. Marcus looked directly at Timothy. We'd like you to take it. Several people turned. Timothy blinked. What does it pay? The room laughed. Marcus smiled. $118,000 base. Timothy leaned back. A year earlier, Parker had told him he lacked ambition. Connor had suggested he had stopped evolving. Neither had understood him. Timothy had never been afraid of growth. He simply had no interest in performing it for an audience. When do you need an answer? He asked. Friday. Timothy nodded. I'll give you one Thursday. Marcus laughed. Of course you will. Timothy accepted the position the next day. He did not buy a new watch. He did not buy a new suit. He did finally replace the cracked case on his phone. That seemed sufficient. In October, he visited Margaret. They sat on her porch outside Chapel Hill. She handed him the annual trust report. Timothy read the first page, then closed it. Margaret looked amused. That's it. I'll read the rest later. You've changed. Timothy looked toward the trees. Maybe. Do you regret not confronting Parker when you found the underwear? He considered the question carefully. No. Never. I regret what happened. That's different. Yes. Margaret waited. Timothy looked at his hands. If I'd confronted her that day, maybe she would have admitted everything. Maybe. Maybe she would have lied. Also possible. Maybe I would have lost my temper. Margaret nodded. Timothy looked toward the road. but I would have been reacting to what I believed, not what I knew. And now? Now I know enough. The autumn wind moved through the trees. For the first time in a long time, Timothy felt no need to explain further. He had lost a marriage, sold a house, watched a family change shape. None of that felt like winning. But he had kept something. His relationship with Emily, his credibility, his work, his self-respect. Most importantly, he had kept control of the one thing Parker and Connor had repeatedly tried to provoke out of him: his own behavior. That evening, Timothy drove back toward Cary. The Ford crossed Interstate 40 under a clear October sky. His phone rang through the dashboard. "Emily? Dad, are you busy Saturday?" "It depends." "On what?" "Whether you're about to ask me to move furniture." She laughed. "Maybe." Timothy smiled. "Then yes, extremely busy." "Too late. I already told my roommate you'd help." "That's fraud." "You investigate fraud." "Exactly. I'll be there at 9. He ended the call. Traffic moved steadily ahead. No hotel receipts waited at home. No hidden messages. No lawyer needed an answer. No one was trying to make him angry. For months, Timothy had believed peace would arrive when Parker lost, when Connor was exposed, or when the divorce became final. He had been wrong. Peace arrived much more quietly. It arrived when their choices stopped controlling his next one. And for the first time since the day he reached beneath the back seat of Parker's Lexus, Timothy Mason was no longer waiting for another piece of evidence. He was simply going home. The last thing Timothy threw away. 1 year after Timothy found the underwear, he was cleaning his own truck. Saturday morning. 17. Clear April sky over Cary. The Ford sat outside the small townhouse Timothy had purchased 3 months earlier, after deciding apartment life had served its purpose. The townhouse was nothing impressive. 2 bedrooms, a narrow garage, a small patch of grass. A mortgage Timothy could comfortably pay without touching a dollar connected to the Mason Family Preservation Trust. He had chosen it in 23 minutes. Emily had laughed when he told her. "You spent longer choosing a toaster." The toaster had more settings. Now Timothy stood beside the Ford with a vacuum hose in one hand. He opened the rear door. Fast food napkins, a socket, 2 receipts, one of Emily's water bottles. Nothing that could destroy a marriage. He smiled faintly. Then the vacuum nozzle struck something beneath the passenger seat. Timothy reached down. His fingers touched cardboard. He pulled out a small black notebook. He stared at it. For several seconds he did not move. He had forgotten it was there. The notebook had spent months beside him. The first piece of evidence. The first timeline. The dates, hotel charges, Parker's statements, Connor's name, the refinance inquiry, the trust questions, the divorce filing. He opened it. The first entry remained exactly as he had written it. April 11th. Charcoal gray men's boxer briefs. Size M, found beneath rear passenger seat of Parker's Lexus. Ownership unknown. Timothy ran his thumb across the page. Ownership unknown. 3 words. They seemed almost absurd now. He knew. Parker had eventually confirmed the underwear belonged to Connor. She had told him during one of their final settlement conversations. Connor had changed clothes in the Lexus after a gym visit before they drove to Durham. The explanation was painfully ordinary. That was the strange thing about evidence. The object itself was rarely as dramatic as the meaning attached to it. A pair of underwear was just fabric. A hotel receipt was just paper. A bank transfer was just numbers. A text message was just words on glass, until the pieces met. Timothy closed the notebook. His phone rang. Emily. "You're still coming at noon, right? Unless you're moving furniture again." "No furniture." "Then probably." "Dad." "Yes, noon. And don't wear work clothes." Timothy looked down. Jeans, gray t-shirt, work boots. "Define work clothes." Emily groaned. Just show up. She ended the call. Timothy placed the notebook on the workbench. At noon, he met Emily at a restaurant in downtown Raleigh. Parker was there. Timothy stopped outside the entrance when he saw her through the glass. Emily had not mentioned that part. For a moment, the old instincts returned. Observe, measure, prepare. Then Timothy opened the door. Emily waved. Surprise. Apparently. Parker stood. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, her clothes simpler. No Bellweather badge, no expensive handbag. Hi, Timothy. Hi, Parker. They sat. Emily had arranged the lunch because she had been accepted into a summer research program at Duke University Hospital. She wanted to tell both parents at once. Timothy understood. This was not about him. It was not about Parker. It was about their daughter. 8 weeks, Emily said. Clinical data project. Timothy nodded. Paid. Emily stared at him. Parker laughed. The sound surprised him. For half a second, the three of them were back at the old kitchen table. Then the moment passed. Yes, Dad, paid. Then I'm proud of you. Only because it's paid. Mostly. Emily kicked him lightly beneath the table. Lunch lasted 90 minutes. No one mentioned Connor. No one mentioned court. No one mentioned the trust. Parker told Emily about her new position with Carolina Surgical Distribution. Timothy spoke about his compliance role at Triangle. You took the promotion, Parker asked, last year. I didn't know. Timothy nodded. Congratulations. Thanks. There was no satisfaction in making her hear it. Once Timothy might have wanted Parker to see what she had underestimated. Now he no longer needed her to. After lunch, Emily left first. Parker and Timothy stood on the sidewalk. Cars moved along Wilmington Street. Parker adjusted the strap of her purse. Can I ask you something? Timothy waited. Do you hate me? He looked at her. A year earlier, the question might have opened everything. Now it felt smaller. No. Parker looked surprised. You should. That sounds exhausting. She almost smiled. Then her expression changed. I was wrong about you. Timothy looked toward the street. About what? The money. The trust. Everything. He said nothing. Parker continued. I thought because you didn't chase things, you didn't want anything. Timothy looked back at her. I wanted plenty. I know. A city bus passed. Parker lowered her eyes. I thought Connor was going somewhere. Timothy did not answer. And I thought you were standing still. Timothy slipped his hands into his pockets. Maybe I was. Parker looked at him. You're not angry. I was. For how long? Long enough. She nodded slowly. Then she asked the question Timothy had heard in different forms from Connor, Rebecca, Margaret, and Emily. Why didn't you confront me that day? Timothy knew exactly which day. He looked across the street. Because if I'd been wrong, I would have damaged our marriage over an assumption. And when you knew, by then confrontation wasn't going to repair anything. Parker looked down. I expected you to explode. Timothy said nothing. I kept thinking if you got angry enough, everything would become simpler. There it was. Not a legal document, not a prepared chronology, just a sentence on a Raleigh sidewalk. Timothy felt no need to punish her with it. You filed before you understood what you were filing around, he said. Parker nodded. I thought the trust was yours. I know. I thought you had millions. I know. I thought you'd hidden it because you didn't trust me. Timothy looked at her. Would it have changed, Connor? Parker's face tightened. No. Then the money wasn't the real problem. She looked away. Timothy did not need an answer. They said goodbye. No hug, no handshake. Just goodbye. That evening, Timothy returned home. The black notebook was still on the workbench. He picked it up and carried it inside. For an hour it sat on his kitchen table. He considered keeping it, not as evidence. That purpose was finished, maybe as a reminder. But Timothy no longer wanted his peace to depend on remembering how carefully he had survived betrayal. He opened the notebook one last time, page after page. Facts, questions, dates. At the back, he found the sentence he had written during Bellweather's audit. "Do not interrupt the trail." Timothy stared at it. That sentence had saved him from several mistakes, but it no longer belonged to the life ahead. He removed 3 pages containing information Rebecca had advised him to retain with his permanent divorce records. Those went into a sealed file. The rest of the notebook went into the household trash. Timothy tied the bag, carried it outside, dropped it into the bin. The lid closed. No ceremony. Sunday morning, Timothy woke at 6:32 without an alarm. He made coffee, opened the back door. The neighborhood was quiet. A sprinkler clicked somewhere beyond the fence. He sat on the small patio. His phone remained inside. No bank statement waited to be checked. No attorney needed documents. No one was asking where Parker had spent Wednesday night. For years, Timothy had believed security meant knowing what came next. A paid mortgage, a stable job, a predictable marriage. Then one ordinary Saturday had shown him how little certainty a person actually owned. He understood security differently now. It was not controlling the future. It was knowing he would meet the truth without abandoning himself. At 9:14, Emily texted him a photograph. She stood outside Duke University Hospital holding her program folder. Timothy replied with 3 words, "Proud of you." Then he placed the phone down. He spent the morning building shelves in the garage. At noon, Benjamin stopped by. He looked at the Ford. "You're seriously keeping that thing?" "Yes." "Why?" "It runs." "So does a refrigerator. You don't drive one." Timothy handed him a drill. "Make yourself useful." Benjamin laughed. They worked for 2 hours. Before leaving, Benjamin mentioned another consulting case. Timothy agreed to review it Tuesday. Nothing urgent, nothing personal, just work. At sunset, Timothy stood in the garage doorway. The Ford was parked outside. Tools hung neatly along the wall. For a second, he remembered another garage, another car, his hand disappearing beneath another seat. Gray fabric between his fingers. That moment had once seemed like the beginning of his destruction. It wasn't. It was the beginning of clarity. Parker had underestimated his silence. Connor had mistaken modesty for weakness. Both had believed a man who did not advertise his value must not have much. They were wrong. Timothy's strength had never been the trust fund. It had never been his investigative background. It had never been the promotion. It was simpler. When humiliation demanded an immediate reaction, he waited. When suspicion offered an easy conclusion, he checked. When lies became documents, he answered with records. When anger offered revenge, he chose distance. And when the system finally exposed what had happened, Timothy did not need to destroy anyone. Truth had already done the work. He switched off the garage light, walked inside, and closed the door. Timothy Mason did not save his marriage. That was never the victory. By the time the truth became undeniable, too much trust had already been spent. What he saved was the part of himself that betrayal could easily have taken with it. He refused to let humiliation choose his behavior. He refused to turn suspicion into certainty before the evidence arrived. And when the facts finally spoke, they did not need Timothy to shout for them. Real life rarely gives us clean villains, perfect evidence, or satisfying confrontations at exactly the right moment. Sometimes the strongest response is not immediate. It is keeping records, asking better questions, protecting the people who should not be dragged into the conflict, getting qualified help, and understanding that being calm does not mean being weak. If you had been Timothy that morning holding another man's underwear beside your wife's car, what would you have done? Would you have confronted her immediately, Or could you have stayed silent long enough to learn the whole truth? Share your answer, and if you've ever had a moment when patience revealed something anger would have missed, tell us about it in the comments. Subscribe if you want to join us tomorrow, because the next story begins with a husband receiving a photograph that everyone expects him to believe, and one tiny